This boy lost over 1,000 sword fights over the years, but a while later, he ended up at the Royal Academy and defeated the top student in his class with just a single strike. Yet even that wasn't enough. He was so confident that he challenged the Academy's best to a duel, and his opponent threw every skill he had at him to try and take the boy down. But in the end, this lowly, nameless nobody with no talent crushed the Academy's greatest pride, and everyone was stunned, unable to believe that a total failure could actually defeat those noble warriors so easily. What they didn't know was this. His life had turned a completely new page. After losing every match, our protagonist Leon started wondering if this was really what he wanted for his life. Because no matter how hard he practiced, he always lost to the same guy, a blonde-haired boy named Lion, who had everything our protagonist lacked. That golden hair, natural charisma, and when he held a sword, it looked like he didn't even have to try. Late at night, while our protagonist practiced alone, the blonde lion was out partying with his family, leaving our hero standing there all by himself, quietly asking the gods why he was such a failure. That was when the gods heard his prayer and dropped a divine gift right at his feet. A deep pit opened up, revealing a sword radiating immense power. It looked like it was alive, and the craziest part was that it could talk. The sword said it would grant him all the power he needed to prove his worth after being beaten. Battered and bruised by that blonde guy for years, his moment to shine had finally arrived. The prophecy said the master of the sword would be a boy named Leon. There were 2 boys with that name at the Elcid Academy, but the Holy Sword knew who was who and made its choice. Leon, a commoner with no sword aura and no family background. With nothing but an iron will, he was the only one fit for the job. So the protagonist climbed into the hole, and despite the crushing pressure from the sword's power, he walked straight up and pulled it from the ground. From that moment on, he became the master of the Holy Sword. The next day he woke up thinking it was all just a dream, but the weapon was still there. The weapon that was about to change his life. A voice echoed from within, warning him not to get cocky just because he had a magic sword. If he wanted to be strong, he would have to bleed for it. The sword then sank into Leon's hand, leaving only a tattoo on his skin. The little ghost began forcing him to train the right way, as it was the only path for him to grow. This way, no one would find it weird to see a commoner walking around school with a glowing holy sword on his back. By the time school started, he was so tired he could barely keep his eyes open. But Elsis was strict and jumped right into teaching him the basics, explaining that vision is one of the most important factors for a warrior. After that, the little ghost began forcing him to train the right way because it was the only way for him to evolve. He spent the whole night training his agility, and by school time, he was so exhausted he could barely keep his eyes open. But Elsis was strict and jumped right into teaching him the basics, explaining that vision is one of the most important factors for a warrior. The little ghost prepared to teach him an incredibly useful visual trick, but Leon just stood there blankly thinking the exercise was just rolling his eyes in some weird way. He even made all kinds of funny faces trying to figure it out, but Elsis cut him off and told him to focus. The training started right there in the classroom, and it went like this. Elsis told Leon to focus on the teacher in front. The protagonist had 10 seconds to memorize everything around him, but Leon was totally confused because he was only focusing on the teacher and ignoring everything else. Elsis explained that humans waste their vision without even realizing it because the brain filters out what it thinks is important and deletes the rest. This training was meant to expand his entire field of vision and capture every detail in his mind like a photograph, while the other students just stared at the boy making all those funny faces, completely convinced he had lost his mind. By late afternoon at the academy, Leon didn't look like a chosen hero at all, but rather like a zombie. Elsis explained that humans waste their vision without even realizing it because the brain filters out what it thinks is important and deletes the rest. This training was meant to expand his entire field of vision and capture every detail into his mind like a photograph, while the other students just stared at the boy making all those funny faces, completely convinced he had lost his mind. By late afternoon at the academy, Leon didn't look like a chosen hero at all, but like a zombie. His eyes and head were pounding, but Elsa said things were progressing very well. She explained that the eye strain was likely from dryness or excessive tension, but the headache was a different story. She said the pain came from awakening a power that had been sealed away for a long time. To Elsis, it was basically just like muscle soreness. Leon asked if that was really what she meant, and she replied, "Yeah, that's right." Elsis told him to look up at the chandelier and asked how many candles were on it. It wasn't exactly the same since the brain doesn't feel pain like muscles, but that was the easiest way to explain it. She told him the training wasn't over yet, and the protagonist suddenly felt fired up and said he understood. Elsa said the first day was pretty good, and he deserved praise for not asking to stop or rest. He guessed 2, but she snapped that it was 3 and called him an idiot. Right after that, she asked him if the person who just walked by a few seconds ago was wearing glasses. The protagonist answered yes, and she shot back asking if that person was wearing a tie. A moment later, she asked if the light in the 12th room on the left was on. Leon said yes, and then she asked about the room above him. He stammered, unsure whether it was or not. She added that repetition has its benefits, but once the body finds an easy way to cope, that becomes a problem. Back in his room, he finally let out a piercing scream. He covered his eyes with both hands, writhing in pain. Elcid said the first day wasn't bad, and he deserved credit for not asking to stop or rest. Leon asked if that was why she made him run, and Elcid confirmed she needed him to pay attention to things he doesn't usually do. That would force him to stop and think. He wondered how long it had been since he was pushed, to the point of such complete exhaustion. It had also been a long time since his mind felt this drained. Elcid said that being too comfortable meant he would stop growing. If he only repeated the same training, he would soon hit his limit. She added that repetition is useful, but that once the body finds an easy way to cope, that becomes a problem. She said his strength is his physical stamina forged through endurance, an iron will, and a solid foundation from repeating sword stances. However, his weakness is the rigidity caused by repeating things too much, lacking flexibility in both body and mind. His body has become accustomed to one method, so changing that method is absolutely mandatory. Leon asked if that was why she made him run, and Elcid confirmed it. She needed him to notice things he usually ignores, forcing him to pause and think. Elcid explained that lifestyle and training methods shape bones, dish muscles and nerves in different ways. Navigators have incredible balance, hunters hone their directional sense, and nomads have astonishing eyesight. She continued saying there wasn't much to tell him about Aura yet. This training was meant to boost his strengths and make up for his weaknesses. That was why Elcid started here. She said his strength was physical stamina, forged through endurance, an iron will, and a solid foundation from repeating sword stances. However, his weakness was the rigidity caused by too much repetition, lacking flexibility in both body and mind. Leon then asked about aura and swordsmanship, which seemed to annoy Elcid a bit. She said, after all, swordsmanship is just how you use the sword. If you can take the basic foundations and adapt them to the situation, that is already considered swordsmanship. She admitted there were incredibly powerful sword techniques, but then she got irritated at Leon and asked who in their right mind would teach that to someone who had only just promised their loyalty. For the first time, using his brain to think, he admitted she was right, while Elcid continued to observe him. The goal was to ensure he never felt too comfortable with his training, and they would start tomorrow. The person who once defeated him had used aura, but if someone like the protagonist suddenly learned it, everyone would be suspicious, so she would teach him aura after he left the academy. For now, he needed to master his observation skills. She said his will and way of thinking were useful, but he still needed something to push himself harder. He hesitated, but deep down he knew she was right. Either way, the punishment was coming, so it was better to accept it now and get started. Elcid said that wasn't enough, and he asked what she meant. She reminded him that no matter how focused he was, repeating things too much would become boring, just like when that anxious teacher realized someone was staring at him. So sooner or later he would get sick of doing the same thing over and over. Elcid asked, "Was it really only 5 seconds?" As Leon collapsed onto the bed and passed out. A little worried, he asked what Elcid planned to do next. She said it was nothing major, just a little punishment whenever he gave the wrong answer. The goal was to ensure he never felt too comfortable with his training, and they would start tomorrow. Leon turned pale with fear at the mere mention of the word punishment. Eagerly awaiting tomorrow, Elcid said they would give it their all, while the protagonist lay there dazed, thinking to himself that this sword was truly a devil. The next morning it started at the academy, and Leon dove into intense training with Elcid perched on his shoulder. She said his will and thinking were useful, but he still needed something to push himself harder. He hesitated, but deep down he knew she was right. The punishment was coming anyway, so it was better to accept it now and begin. That way he would also build his endurance. Elcid asked if he was sure. The protagonist gave a thumbs up and told her to bring it on. Next, she asked how many pigeons were at the open window. The protagonist said there weren't any. Elcid asked, "Was it really only 5 seconds?" as Leon collapsed onto the bed and passed out. Elsid said that for only 1 month of training, that was pretty good, because spotting that crow was very difficult. Next time she would go easier on him. Filled with hope, Leon didn't have time to ask before Elsid interrupted, saying they would stop and rest for today. Overjoyed. The protagonist thought that he could finally rest after a whole month. Eagerly awaiting tomorrow, Elsid said they would give it their all while the protagonist lay there dazed, thinking to himself that this sword was truly a devil. The next morning, it started at the academy, and Leon dove into intense training with Elsid on his shoulder. Afterward, the blond boy turned to look at him with sharp eyes and said, "Long time no see, Leon." The answer was, a month had passed since the challenge, and he thought the protagonist had given up like so many others, but then he added, looking at Leon's expression, "It seems you're thirstier than ever." The protagonist answered 10. Then she asked which one would fly away first, and he said the 6th one. Next, she asked how many pigeons were at the open window. The protagonist said there weren't any, that was a crow. Elsid said that for only 1 month of training, that was pretty good, because spotting that crow was very difficult, even so. She said you were close to failing and filled with hope, but before Leon could ask anything, Elsid cut him off, saying they would stop and rest for the day. The blond guy laughed and waved it off. He teased the protagonist for being too cold and asked why he wouldn't stay to chat a bit longer since they hadn't seen each other in a while. Then the blond guy suddenly appeared and called out to him, catching him completely off guard. For a few seconds, both of them said nothing. Then the blond guy turned to look at him with sharp eyes and said, "Long time no see, Leon." The protagonist thought to himself that he hadn't seen him since he started training with Elsid. The two stood in silence for a moment until the blond Leon asked if he had heard the rumors that he wasn't actually a commoner. The blond guy said he still saw the protagonist training after lunch. That sounded just like him. He had come because he was a bit worried, but now he felt relieved. That guy didn't look like he was trying to hide anything at all, and now the protagonist wondered if he should start speaking more respectfully. The answer was this. A month had passed since the challenge, and he thought the protagonist would have given up like everyone else. But then he added that, looking at Leon's expression, it seemed he was hungrier for this than ever before. The protagonist asked, "Is my expression that obvious?" The blond guy smiled and replied, "That's right." He said the expressions of those who think they can beat him look completely different from the look on the protagonist's face. That answer made Leon smile. If he refused, it wouldn't hurt him at all. He had more than enough power to avoid every duel without revealing his true identity, so they only happened because he allowed them to. So if that's all, why are you still standing here? The blond guy laughed and waved his hand, teasing the protagonist for being so cold, asking why he wouldn't stay to chat a bit longer since it had been so long, and compared to that, all you can do is keep putting your all into this. The blond guy just smiled and said, 10 minutes is enough. He scratched his head, not knowing what to say. He asked if he really wanted to end it, and the blond guy replied there was no reason to drag it out any longer. The two stood in silence for a moment until the blond Leon asked if he had heard the rumors, that he wasn't actually a commoner. The protagonist found it ridiculous and retorted, "Rumors!" With a provocative look, the blond guy added that if Leon lost, he would have to become his subordinate. He didn't look like he was trying to hide anything. And now the protagonist wondered if he should start speaking more respectfully. The blond guy said that wasn't why he started the conversation. He should treat him like someone hiding his identity, not a senior, which left Leon feeling a bit surprised. It wasn't a magic contract, just empty words, and words can be broken. The other guy asked if he knew why he accepted all those challenges. Thinking it over, the protagonist replied, yes. If he refused, it wouldn't hurt him at all. The blond guy agreed that with anyone else that would be true. But the protagonist was too stubborn and full of pride, so he wouldn't do that. That thought made the protagonist annoyed. It sounded like nothing but pity from someone who was guaranteed to win, and compared to that, all you can do is keep putting your all into this. Then the blond guy suddenly said they should put an end to this. The blond guy confirmed it, and the protagonist was about to ask one more thing immediately after. He asked if he really wanted to end it, and the blond guy replied there was no reason to drag it out any further. The next duel would be the last one using pure swordsmanship, no aura, and real swords instead of wooden ones. He was shaken by that offer, and slowly tried to accept it. With a provocative look, the blond guy added that if Leon lost, he would have to become his subordinate. Smiling, he agreed, and said he would choose what he wanted on the day of the duel before leaving. The blond guy told the protagonist to let him know when he was ready. The location needed to be prepared, so he wanted to be notified at least 3 days in advance. They went their separate ways. Both had committed their hearts and souls to what was coming. He asked what guarantee there was for that promise. This would be a real clash between him, the one chosen by the Holy Sword, and the other, the prince aiming for the throne. The blonde guy agreed that for anyone else that would be true, but the protagonist was too stubborn and full of pride, so he wouldn't do that. She wondered if he was afraid having come this far, especially since he had looked fine just moments before. He added that the protagonist was exactly the type of person who would keep a promise no matter the reason. What he really wanted to know was whether he was actually getting stronger or not. If he loses, he will become the other guy's subordinate. Staring intently at the scars on his hands, Leon remarks that the recent training was brutal, yet he doesn't feel any stronger at all. A spark of excitement ignites within him as he asks what will happen once he wins. She tells him he has already grown much stronger than he realizes, so there is no need to worry. Elsid explains that visual perception is a form of power in itself. He cannot fully grasp it yet because he hasn't mastered it. But she says she has prepared for even more. He tells Leon he can ask for anything provided it does not tarnish his honor, or bring harm to the family. A secret sword aura technique, whatever it may be, and when he confirms, she tells him to wait stretches and says something unbelievable is about to happen. Before leaving, the blonde guy tells the protagonist to let him know when he is ready, as the location needs to be prepared, so he wants at least 3 days' notice. They go their separate ways. Both have poured their heart and soul into what's coming. Soon after, an instructor orders the male students to line up by registration number and tells anyone who isn't feeling well to step aside. This will be a real showdown between him, the one chosen by the Holy Sword, and the prince aiming for the throne, where physical skills are evaluated without the use of mana. Since nobles still hold the top spots, 9th place had always been his limit. She wonders if he's scared given how far he's come, especially since he seemed fine just a moment ago. The protagonist replies that's not it. What he really wants to know is whether he has truly become stronger. Elsid looks puzzled by the question. Staring intently at the scars on his hands, Leon remarks that the recent training was brutal, yet he doesn't feel any stronger. The sword stays silent for a moment, thinking. Then she tells him he has already grown much stronger than he realizes, so there is no need to worry. Elsid explains that visual perception is a form of power in itself. He cannot fully grasp it yet because he hasn't mastered it, but she says she has prepared for even more. Before explaining, she asks if he has a physical fitness test later. When he confirms, she tells him to wait stretches and says something unbelievable is about to happen. She smirks, certain that he won't be able to take back what he just said. Leon feels uneasy, not understanding what she means. Soon after, an instructor orders the male students to line up by registration number and tells anyone who isn't feeling well to step aside. As the others start warming up, he becomes tense, recalling how he was called in 9th place last time during the evaluation of physical skills without mana. Since nobles still hold the top spots, 9th place had always been his limit. Elsid asks what rank that Leon guy is, and when he says first, she remarks that it makes sense. That blonde guy has trained very hard, even if he isn't as good as him, and he is far ahead of those pampered nobles. The test is a short-distance sprint, 2 laps around the field, about 800 meters. That Leon guy finishes in 1 minute and 20 seconds, while he took 1 minute and 40 seconds. That 20-second gap makes the blonde guy seem invincible. But Elsid confidently tells him not to be afraid. His eyes light up while his opponent begins to look uneasy, and hearing this, the protagonist says he will trust Elsid. The protagonist replies not yet, so the man checks to see if he is truly not using it. The evaluator gives the signal and everyone dashes off, trying to reach the finish line as fast as possible. He realizes the man is checking for aura because it would shatter during the test. If he were actually using it, even the blonde Leon would be stunned. The protagonist has really changed this much without even learning aura. In just a few weeks, he surged past everyone. He keeps accelerating and leads the whole way, launching like a rocket as the man reviews his file. He notices his previous training intensity was insanely high and wonders if all that resting finally allowed his body to develop. After years of grinding, though, he quickly dismisses the thought as absurd. Meanwhile, others look at him with jealousy, and his eyes light up while his opponent begins to look uneasy. The evaluator steps forward and asks if he has learned aura yet. She nonchalantly replies that this bite was entirely within her expectations, but he presses for a real answer. The man grabs his hand and channels mana into his body, realizing he is checking for aura, because it would shatter during the test if he were actually using it. Elsid says that in this world, most training methods only focus on developing muscle, but that is only half the battle. Muscles are connected to neurons, and the amount of power they output depends on how developed those nerves are. He asks the protagonist what he has been training. Leon shyly says he only did basic exercises and actually got more rest than before, so the man reviews his file. He notices his previous training intensity was insanely high and wonders if all that resting finally allowed his body to develop after years of grinding, though he dismisses the thought as absurd. Meanwhile, others look at him with jealousy, and the blonde Leon looks restless and confused. He asks how the hell she managed to do that. She nonchalantly replies that this was entirely within her expectations, but he presses for a real answer. Instead of answering, she asks where the power in the body comes from. For a moment, Leon sinks into his own private space where only he can see and talk to the sword. He falls silent while the others wonder. What is going on? Elsid says that in this world, most training methods only focus on developing muscle, but that is only half the battle. Muscles are connected to neurons and the amount of power they output depends on how developed those nerves are. So power doesn't just lie in muscle size. He asks why Elsid didn't tell him sooner, and she replies that it would have only caused him more pain. You've never heard of this before. Elvis explained that muscle density is mostly innate, and muscles can only grow to a certain point. The protagonist reached that limit through brutal training. She insisted that she only did what was necessary, and now everything is playing out perfectly. Dion began to wonder if she was more like a cursed sword than a holy one, if this blade truly carried the soul and mind of the great hero. Rodrigo, is it? Could Rodrigo actually be a villain instead of a hero? He didn't remember being trained like that, so he guessed something must have happened while he was asleep. Elsid revealed it was a part of the punishment, leaving him stunned. The blonde one shot Leon a look full of arrogance, and he glared right back. Elvis explained that something lying dormant inside him had been awakened. That was why his muscles were in such agony, and why every failure in vision training came with such torment. Surpassing him in just 1 month really was insane, and the protagonist knew he shouldn't get cocky just yet, but it still gnawed at him. He asked why Elsa didn't tell him sooner, and she replied that it would only have caused him more pain. Burning with determination, the protagonist began to believe he could win. When Elsid said that mastering his vision was the only way to escape the pain, the protagonist remembered a moment with his teacher afterward. He remembered another moment with a classmate, realizing that once he knew the reason for the punishment, he understood he had to grit his teeth and endure it. Elsid believed he would never push himself to that extent if he didn't experience it all himself. Then she hinted that he should thank her. She insisted she only did what was necessary, and now everything is playing out perfectly. Leon began to wonder if she was more like a cursed sword than a holy one, if this blade truly carried the soul and mind of the great hero Rodrigo. So could Rodrigo actually be a villain instead of a hero? He said that would be difficult without real combat. So Elsid suggested he leave the academy. Just as expected, the blonde protagonist had broken his own personal record. The protagonist excitedly asked if she could teach him swordsmanship, but Elsid immediately shot down the idea, calling it a delusion. He had every reason to be frustrated. He came in second but still couldn't defeat his greatest rival. Surpassing him in just 1 month was truly insane, and the protagonist knew he shouldn't get cocky just yet. But it still gnawed at him. Even so, rising from those bottom rankings all the way to second place was a huge step forward, and he burned with determination. The protagonist began to believe he could win. Elsid asked if he really thought that guy Leon would fall for such a weak trick. That night in the dorm, as he was getting ready for bed, Leon asked what the next training would be. Thinking about his improved performance and timing, Elsid said that a sword polished, and with persistent effort would become incredibly strong. Leon had now reached an equivalent physical level, and his opponents wouldn't be able to defeat him as easily as before. Now he needed real combat experience to apply what he had learned. He said it would be difficult without actual fighting, so Elsid suggested he leave the academy. The protagonist excitedly asked if she could teach him swordsmanship, but Elsid immediately shot down the idea, calling it a delusion. The next day, the protagonist was still lost in thought about his conversation with Elsid. Once he managed it, basic swordsmanship skills would be more than enough for a long time. Without aura, martial arts were just cheap tricks. Looking closer, Leon spotted a badge on someone's uniform, and realized they were from the nobility. Once people saw through his pattern, he would be easily defeated. To them, it was obvious the protagonist had used some trick to fool the instructors, but they wouldn't be fooled so easily. The protagonist thought to himself that it was extraordinary how people like this were everywhere, then loudly asked what his ranking had to do with them. Thinking about his improved performance and timing, Elsid said that a sword polished with persistent effort would become incredibly strong. They A snap that they had no way of knowing what tricks he used, especially since he had never sworn loyalty and his previous 9th-place ranking was already suspicious enough. Now they assumed his true nature was finally exposed and aggressively demanded to know which family was backing him. Leon realized they weren't listening at all and understood that they never intended to have a proper conversation from the start. She asked if anyone in the academy would be willing to duel him, but the protagonist quickly replied no. The next day, the protagonist was still thinking about his talk with Elcid when suddenly someone asked if he was that commoner with that name. A group of male students was glaring down at him from the stairs. Looking closer, Leon spotted a badge on someone's uniform and realized they were from the nobility. They angrily demanded to know how a commoner could have snatched the runner-up spot. To them, it was obvious the protagonist had used some trick to fool the instructors, but they wouldn't be fooled so easily. The protagonist thought to himself that it was extraordinary how people like this were everywhere, then loudly asked his ranking what it had to do with them. He told them to go complain to the instructors if they didn't like the results. All three of them widened their eyes, unable to believe someone like him would dare talk back. They snapped that they had no way of knowing what tricks he used, especially since he had never sworn loyalty and his previous 9th-place ranking was already suspicious enough. Now they assumed his true nature was finally exposed and aggressively demanded to know which family was backing him. Leon realized they weren't listening at all and understood that they never intended to have a proper conversation from the start. Elcid asked if he was their leader and if he came from a powerful family. Right at that moment, another figure appeared on the stairs behind them. He was the one who always held the runner-up spot in physical tests, so he must have been losing his mind over Leon, snatching that position away. He told them to calm down, saying that even if Leon was a commoner, they were all fellow students at the same academy. The crowd gathered around began to murmur. They admired him for those noble words. He added that the main character might feel insecure, but as a noble he couldn't just turn a blind eye to something like this. After speaking, he turned to ask for his entourage's opinion, and they nodded in absolute agreement. Truly living up to the pride of the Bookbon family. That response sent the other nobles into a fury. But young Master Elman just needed a wave of his hand to silence them. Elman proposed a few sparring matches under the supervision of an instructor. He was the one who always held the runner-up spot in the physical tests, so he must have been losing his mind over Leon snatching that position away. Nobles, bullying the weak and the weak rising up against the nobles. The invitation to have an instructor present sounded generous, but the main character knew full well that the offer put him at a huge disadvantage. Elman said it was a pity that their first encounter had to happen under such circumstances. He added that the main character might feel insecure, but as a noble he couldn't just turn a blind eye to something like this. Having said that, he reached out his hand and demanded that he accept their offer. Leon responded calmly, saying he would decide after hearing what that offer actually was. That reply sent the other nobles into a fury. But young Master Elman just needed a wave of his hand to silence them. He gritted his teeth for a moment, then realized that asking his opponent for a favor was no different than debasing himself. The main character stared back dimly, realizing that this was the true intent behind everything. The two exchanged calm smiles. The invitation to have an instructor present sounded generous, but the main character knew full well that the offer put him at a huge disadvantage. Elman hadn't banned the use of aura, which meant he would use it to gain the upper hand. Leon also knew that if he objected, they would spread rumors that he used tricks to deceive the instructor, and if he refused, they would just make up other rumors. He turned to look at the crowd where his eyes met the blonde-haired Leon. He knew the blonde Leon could easily pull him out of this mess. He gritted his teeth for a moment. Then he suddenly realized that asking his opponent for a favor was no different than debasing himself. To him, that was 1,000 times more humiliating than the insults he was currently enduring. So the main character decided to accept the challenge. The main character didn't care much about who was watching the match. He just felt a little sorry that he couldn't beat them to a pulp. To his heart's content, that was all. Returning to his room, Leon said that Bastard had made a very interesting expression, and he never thought he would gain such practical combat experience. Helmet would have to be the one to supervise the matches. Every day he would only fight one person, and if he won, they would never be allowed to question his abilities again. Having said that, he asked straight out if Elman would dare to accept it. Leon purposely chose Helmet because that devil of an instructor could see through any trick and right at that moment. As if by telepathy, the instructor suddenly felt his ears burning. Full of excitement, he snapped his fingers and said this was probably the simplest method yet. A screen appeared in front of Leon along with his name. The main character didn't care much about who was watching the match. He just felt a little sorry that he couldn't beat them to a pulp to his heart's content. But anyway, returning to his room, Leon said that Bastard had made a very interesting expression, and he never thought he would gain such practical combat experience. Elzid said that at least in terms of results, it was perfect. Unsure, he asked her if he could win without using aura. He admitted he didn't know because he had never fought anyone who actually used that stuff. Elzid suddenly got excited and asked if he wanted her to show him an easier way. He pointed out that, as the son of a count, Elman must have used every type of elixir possible and gone through every kind of training. But Elzid said, if a person cannot properly absorb those elixirs, then they're just mediocre, and Elman's training process probably can't compare to his level 18 skill and the job description that says he is a hero. Still not knowing how to use aura, surprised, he asked what he was looking at. And she replied, what else? With her help and his own efforts, even without aura, he could still beat those idiots to a pulp. After that, she shifted the screen and said these were Elman's stats. He asked if that meant he wouldn't be at a disadvantage in terms of pure physical strength, and if so, then everything would be fine. Leon was shocked and asked if Elman was really that weak. He pointed out that as the son of a Count, Elman must have used every type of elixir possible and gone through every kind of training, but Elzid said if a person cannot absorb those elixirs properly, then they're just mediocre, and Elman's training process probably can't compare to his. She explained that most people without aura would be like an E rank stuck at the 99-point mark. Even so, she said he could break through that wall thanks to his brutal training and his rapid growth. With her help and his own efforts, even without aura, he could still beat those idiots to a pulp. He said he had changed a lot in just 1 month, and added that if Leon were acting recklessly, he would stop him, but it seemed that wouldn't be necessary. He asked if that meant he wouldn't be at a disadvantage in terms of pure physical strength, and if so, then everything would be fine. Smiling, the instructor said he was pretending not to understand and told him to give it his all. Although he was still confused, he decided that from now on. You're aiming for the top. You don't just back down. There's no way you'd lose to a punk like him. Then you ask why your screen calls you a hero who still can't use aura. And Elzid says, if you hate that, then just get stronger. With a furious expression, the teenager loudly demands to know why a low-born amateur like you dares to make him wait and acts like the rules don't apply to you. You turn around and see the instructor watching you. He says you've changed so much in just 1 month, adding that if Leon were acting recklessly, he would stop you, but it seems that won't be necessary. The instructor declares that both fighters are staking their names and their honor on this match. With a knowing smile, the instructor tells you to stop playing dumb and to give it your all, even though you're still confused. Hyomut, looking pumped, tells you to teach those idiots a lesson and asks if you understand now. Hyomut turns to ask what you want, and you say, you want this duel to be the last time this guy bothers you as you step into the hall, which is already packed with people. Leon walks in with a determined look. Immediately, someone calls out to you. The teenager is fuming loudly, demanding to know why a low-born amateur dares to make him wait, acting like the rules don't apply to him. You brush him off, turn to the instructor, and say, let's get started. Then, with a warning, the guy charges into the arena screaming as he lunges straight at you with his wooden sword. The instructor declares that both fighters are staking their names and their honor on this match. As he watches, what looks like a diagonal slash from top right to bottom left is so telegraphed that you wonder if it's just a feint. Fuming with rage, Jeff says he wants this low-born trash to confess his sins while Leon just stares at him in silence. Helmut turns to ask what you want. And you say you want this duel to be the last time this guy bothers you. The instructor is stunned and his friends look pale. He orders both to take 2 steps forward and get into position. Lionel and Leon stand by thinking you're at a disadvantage since you can't use aura, and even a wooden sword can leave a gash if infused with aura. Elzid asks if you want to check the kid's stats, but you say no. No matter how strong he is, he's just a lackey for that guy, and you don't need Elzid's help against someone like that. Then, with a warning, the guy charges into the arena screaming as he lunges straight at you with his wooden sword. Leon reads the attack instantly. It looks like a diagonal slash from the top right down to the bottom left, but it's so obvious that you wonder if it's a feint. So you wait and watch the blade descend toward your head, wondering to yourself why he's so slow, treating him like he's voluntarily signed up to be your sparring partner. She tells you that you should let him know the last knockdown was just you being merciful. The instructor is stunned while his friends look ghost-white. Even Lionel and the blonde protagonist are shocked. Eric stands frozen with a vein popping on his forehead, drool dripping down his body, trembling slightly. You focus and use the sensory ability you've learned. Observing his limb movements and even his eyes is enough to see through his next move. Leon can hardly believe the fight ended. So quickly, groaning on the ground, the guy tries to spit out a word, then stumbles to his feet shouting that you shouldn't think you won just because of a lucky shot. It was just a slip-up. Furious, he demands another round immediately. Helmut brushes him off, declaring that Jeff Herrick has lost, and he won't tolerate such pathetic behavior. Screaming like a maniac on the other side, he challenges you to keep dodging if you can. Elsid scoffs coldly at the way he attacks so crazily, even after tasting defeat, laughing. Herrick says that for a commoner, the protagonist knows his place. While defending, Leon realizes aura can enhance the body, but only up to a point. This time, you won't hold back anymore. Elsid speaks up and tells you not to end the fight with just one blow. As they face off, the instructor signals the start of the match. And Elsid reminds you that this is your first time using your sensory ability in real combat, as he's effectively become your sparring partner. She tells you to let him know. The last knockdown was just you being merciful. Clutching his injured leg, he curses Leon, calling him an idiot, saying you should have just finished him off. The punk lunges again with a massive but reckless swing. Elsid asks what you're thinking, and you say she was right. You focus and use the sensory ability you've learned. Watching his movements, even his eyes, is enough to predict all his subsequent moves. Elsid says you only need to catch the first movement to anticipate everything else. Herrick attacks repeatedly while Leon defends calmly. Only Eric's friends are silent, looking terrified and shocked. That night, everyone was still buzzing about you taking on Elman's group. You realize Eric has started using aura, but you can still read through every move. You challenge them one by one, starting with Jeff, and they all suffered such crushing defeats, they had to crawl to the infirmary. Elsid scoffs coldly at the way he attacks so crazily, even after tasting defeat. What a total amateur. He doesn't even know how to manage his stamina. While defending, Leon realizes aura can enhance the body, but only up to a certain limit. After blocking another strike, the protagonist realizes something. Leon retorts that today will be different, but the Holy Sword warns him not to. Letting his guard down, he is struck by Elman, leaving him furious. He jumps back to create distance, clutching his injured leg. He calls Leon an idiot and says he should have finished him off right then and there. He screams that strikes like that won't take him down, but the next second he realizes something is wrong and gets pummeled by a flurry of attacks. In a flash, Elsid asks what the MC is thinking, and he replies that she was right to train his perception. He needs a moving target. Unknown skills are the most dangerous, and he might not be able to see through this move with his own eyes. Helmut immediately declares Leon the winner, and the crowd erupts in cheers. The protagonist calmly replies, asking if that is really the case. Then he says he knew this would happen all along. That evening, everyone is still buzzing about his confrontation with Elman's group. One student admits they had no idea the protagonist was this strong. No matter how impressive the protagonist is, Elman believes that without aura, he will be at a disadvantage once aura is unleashed, especially since Elman can coat his blade in it. Using a wooden sword to block that would be incredibly dangerous. Knowing that, the protagonist plans to avoid head-on clashes and use bait instead. Your swordplay is fancy, he says, but it lacks spirit. She says she can't believe they are that weak even with aura. Leon replies that today will be different, but the Holy Sword warns him not to. Let his guard down. The protagonist enters the arena and faces his next opponent. Elman is already waiting, expression deadly serious with aura surging wildly around him. And Elsid notices that he has finally cast aside his arrogance. Elman takes his stance, his aura becoming even more threatening. Leon admits that no matter how terrible this guy is, he is still from a direct noble lineage. He also recalls the status window the sword displayed earlier. If the protagonist only beat a few foolish commoners, that would be one thing, but this is different. He says if the protagonist agrees to join his side now, he will overlook the petty grievances between them. Unknown skills are the most dangerous, and you might not be able to see through this move with your own eyes. With a smug look, Elman says he didn't expect his chance would actually come. The protagonist calmly replies, asking if that is really the case. Then he says he knew this would happen. That only makes Elman angrier. Now truly enraged, Elman screams that he is being arrogant, just because he learned a few worthless tricks. No matter how impressive the protagonist is without using aura, Elman believes he will be at a disadvantage once aura is unleashed, and if Elman can even coat his blade in aura, then using a wooden sword to block is incredibly dangerous. Knowing that, the protagonist plans to avoid head-on clashes and bait him. She asks if that weak little brat just called her skills useless. Instantly, a blast of energy cuts across Leon's face before he can react. A thin cut appears on his cheek, and he wonders if that was sword intent. On the other side of the arena, Elman points his aura-coated sword at him. He starts to think he might not be able to handle this. She asks if he sees that grinning little brat, and he anxiously replies, yes. Then she says one of the worst insults to a master is being looked down upon by their student. Leon admits that no matter how terrible this guy is, he is still from a direct noble lineage. With a smug smile, Elman says it's no surprise the others failed. Leon lunges forward with incredible speed and starts raining down rapid attacks while Elman does his best to defend. He says if the protagonist agrees to join his side now, he will overlook the petty grievances between them. But before he can finish, something whistles toward him. Leon barely dodges and his blade grazes Elman's face. The two separate, and now a cut marks Elman's cheek. Irritated, he snaps back, now truly enraged, screaming that the protagonist is arrogant just for learning a few worthless tricks. Furious, Elman growls, calling him stubborn, and an eyesore, saying he should be rotting in his own pathetic hole. Offended, Elcid repeats, worthless skills, you say? He prepares to make up for the lack of strength and speed with Rodrigo's perception. She asks if that weak little brat just called her skills useless. He has to read the movements more clearly, faster, and over a wider range, until suddenly something changes in the enemy before him. She snaps that, they say that even rivers and mountains change after 15 years. Yet after 300 years, she is being mocked by a brat who still wets the bed. Leon blocks a strike that seemed too fast to see, then switches to the exact same stance as Elman. She asks if he sees that grinning little brat, and he anxiously replies yes. Even angrier, Elman curses and screams, asking if he really doesn't know how to use sword intent. The judges still can't feel a hint of sword intent from Leon, and can't believe he has pushed Elman this far. Then Elman sneers and says he can't believe he actually has to use this move against someone like him. I'll knock out as many as I can. Elman activates a new surge of power around his body and his sword, and then he realizes it's an esoteric sword technique. Now the enemy can flexibly switch between thrusts and slashes, and he knows he cannot afford to be careless, not even for a moment. He is clearly overwhelmed by the power behind those strikes. In the stands, everyone screams that Elman is being pushed back, but the blonde-haired protagonist says no. The protagonist holds the upper hand, but Elman refuses to be knocked out of the ring. Elman lunges with a powerful strike, but the boy manages to dodge. But the follow-up attack catches him off guard. He's pushing himself way too hard. If not for Elman's aura, the blonde-haired Leon realizes this battle would turn into a pure test of stamina. Furious, Elman growls, calling him incredibly stubborn. An eyesore who belongs in the gutter even if he managed to dodge that blow. It would still have slammed into his ribs, and a broken rib would mean the end of the fight. He prepares to compensate for his lack of strength and speed by using Rodrigo's ocular technique, a power that helps him predict his opponent's next move. If he can read the attack just a split second earlier, he can close the distance. He thinks he's going to lose. This is insane. Everything feels like they're fighting underwater. Leon blocks a strike that seemed too fast to track, mirroring Elman's stance. Exhilarated, he realizes his strategy is actually working. Even more enraged, Elman curses and screams, demanding to know if he seriously doesn't know how to use aura. The judge still can't sense a shred of aura from Leon and can't believe he's pushed Elman this far. He lands behind him while Elman stands frozen in shock, unable to process that he actually took a hit. He turns around glaring with pure fury. Someone remarks that he only managed to strike his left arm, questioning if fighting with one hand against two is really putting Elman at a disadvantage. Elman unleashes a new surge of power around his body and his blade, and the boy realizes it's a secret sword technique. Now his enemy can fluidly switch between thrusting, stabbing, and slashing, and he knows he cannot afford to lose focus for even a second. Elman closes in to attack, and Leon reads it instantly. If he uses both hands in a direct confrontation, he'll regain the upper hand. And at that moment, Leon's wooden sword would surely shatter under the pressure of his aura. Elman lunges with a massive strike. The boy dodges, but the follow-up attack catches him off guard. The first strike was just a feint. This technique was designed with the assumption that the target would definitely dodge. It's the Woban family's secret technique, aimed straight at the torso even if you dodge. It will still slam into your ribs, and a broken rib means the fight is over. Even with his ocular technique tracking the sword path, Leon knows he can't fully escape it. Helmet, with a deeply satisfied look on his face, declares him the winner. A moment later, Elcid proudly says her student did a great job. defeated by a useless skill next time Elman should watch his mouth. Leon wonders if losing once is enough to fix that attitude of his, but he thinks it's fine either way, because they swore to accept the outcome of the match. Elsid says she was actually surprised herself, leaving Leon confused. She explains that he just opened the door, add to acceleration, and he's developing much faster than she expected. But instead of backing down, he leaps over Elman's head. As Helmet picks up the teeth from the floor, he thinks the protagonist really did knock out quite a few teeth. From above, Leon crashes down with a massive blow, and Elman feels the pain clearly. He asks Elsa if acceleration was what happened when he dodged Elman's secret sword move. Someone remarks that he only hit the left arm and wonders if fighting one-handed against two really puts Elman at a disadvantage. The blonde Leon tells Karen not to worry about that arm. The real shock is the fact that the Robin family's secret sword technique failed. Elman thinks it's not over yet. If he uses both hands in a direct confrontation, he will regain control, and at that moment, Leon's wooden sword will certainly break under the layer of his aura. Normally only a few people manage to learn acceleration after mastering aura, but Leon used it before ever learning aura, and he only applied it to his legs. Elman screams that this whole time. He's had him in the palm of his hand, mocking him as a commoner, but the boy retaliates with a sharp upward sword flick, sending Elman's blade flying. Elman doesn't even seem to understand what just happened. Then the next blow slams straight into his mouth, spitting out saliva. The hit sends teeth scattering everywhere. The crowd goes wild, and Karen looks absolutely thrilled for Leon. Helmet, with a deeply satisfied look on his face, declares him the winner. A moment later, Elsid proudly says her student did a great job. Defeated by a useless skill next time Elman should watch his mouth. Leon wonders if losing once is enough to fix that attitude of his, but he thinks it's fine either way, because they swore to accept the outcome of the match. Elsid says she was actually surprised herself, leaving Leon confused. She explains that he just opened the door to acceleration, and he is developing much faster than she expected. If he used it on his whole body, his internal organs would have been twisted inside out by now. As Helmet picks up the teeth from the floor, he thinks the protagonist really did knock out quite a few teeth. Elsid says it is time, and for now he should take good care of his body. He asks Elsa if acceleration was what happened when he dodged Elman's secret sword move. She asked if you know that sometimes the body moves slower than the mind, and she said that in a state of acceleration, reflexes can surpass conscious thought. It's not just about speed, so she asked Leon to think about how trained swordsmen do it, how they manage to move so fast. You replied that it's because they've learned to use aura. Elsid said that's only partially true. A new day begins at the academy. Usually only a few people learn acceleration after mastering aura, but Leon had been using it before learning aura, and he only used it in his legs. A few girls whispered as you walked by, and soon it was clear everyone was gossiping about you. It meant you had surpassed your own limits through pure instinct and willpower. Others claimed you were hiding your real name and were sent by the royal palace as a secret weapon. You asked, "Didn't you just say my body couldn't take it?" Because you felt completely healthy. Perhaps it was because you had only used a fraction of your power. Elsid admitted you had a point, and then you noticed someone ahead. If you had used it on your entire body, your internal organs would have been twisted into a mess. Starting to worry, the protagonist asked, "Isn't that extremely dangerous?" Elsid said, "It's time. And for now, you should take better care of your body." Leon asked what she meant time for what, and then the side effects of the acceleration suddenly slammed into him. Elsid replied simply, "It's pain." She told you to be grateful that the pain only hit after the acceleration was over and warned you not to try it again until you learned aura. Otherwise, it would cost you your life. After that, she asked if you had been avoiding her lately, and why you suddenly went and got into a fight with those nobles. She wanted to know if you understood her and just how much Leon had been worrying about you. The main character walked around the school grounds through the crowd. A few girls whispered as he passed by, and it quickly became clear that everyone was talking about him. Some claimed he had been raised through experiments and elixirs. Finally, he understood the feelings that the other Leon had for her. He understood why that guy was jealous whenever he got to be by her side. Afterward, he coincidentally ran into the group of people he had defeated and realized they were the ones helping to spread those rumors. Elsid said that losers always find excuses to make up for things and mock the pride of the nobles. But Leon pointed out that if they actually had any pride, they would never have picked a fight with him in the first place. Then he remembered the moment Elsid first appeared, giving him the chance to prove that those emotions weren't meaningless. Karen said that the fights had made him famous all over the academy, and now some people were even rumored that he only got strong because he found a magic sword. She greeted him, "Hello." The main character was surprised, and he blurted out, "Karen." She tried to calm the situation. She asked why he was crying, and comforted him, saying they were just nonsense rumors. With a smile, Leon asked how she had been lately, and shouldn't she be in alchemy class right now? Then he teased her about skipping class. Karen scolded him, calling him an idiot. She explained that her teacher was sick, so the class was canceled, and asked if he really thought she would skip class just to come and see him. The main character thought to himself that even though Elcide was rude and unpleasant, she still supported him when he was at his absolute lowest. Leaning back in her chair, she said that something about him felt very different, leaving the main character confused. After that, she asked if you had been avoiding her lately, and why you suddenly went and got into a fight with those nobles. She wanted to know if you understood her and just how much Leon had been worrying about you. The main character thought that if a hero is someone who saves the world, then Elcide was his hero, so he was determined to become someone worthy of that title. Someone strong, worthy of the master of the holy sword, and someone who could exceed Elcide's expectations. Karen stared at him without blinking clearly, not understanding what was happening. Finally, he understood the feelings the other Leon had for her. He understood why he was jealous that he got to be by her side. It all stemmed from a sense of inferiority. Like he wasn't anything special. He hated living in a world where effort alone wasn't enough, and he had been tormenting himself because of it. Then he remembered the moment Elcide first appeared, giving him the chance to prove that those emotions weren't meaningless. Karen said those fights had made him famous throughout the academy, and now some were even claiming that he only got strong because he found a magic sword. She stared at him for a moment and realized he was crying. This sudden change confused her, and she tried to calm the situation. She asked why he was crying and comforted him, saying they were just empty rumors. She added that the story about the sword was definitely made up, but Leon replied that the truth wasn't quite like that. He remembered the time Karen said he looked much better now. That made him feel a bit flustered. The main character thought to himself that even though Elcide was rude and prickly, she still held him up when he was at the bottom of the abyss. Meanwhile, Elcide was chewing a cookie and grumbling, "What now? You brat, Leon, I already apologized for making the atmosphere so awkward, didn't I?" Then LSD wondered why he had suddenly matured, even if just a little. He thought it would be amazing to occasionally talk to the protagonist, since no one else in the group could. No one could be that honest or truly stand by his side, so he became determined to be someone worthy of that title. A man strong enough to wield the holy sword and exceed expectations. Elcide stared at him clearly, not understanding what was happening. Elcide said she didn't get it either, as he had snapped yet another wooden sword. She wondered why such a perfectly crafted training blade couldn't hold up. She remarked that someone born as perfect as she is could never be expected to understand. His fighting style generated such intense impact that it put too much strain on the weapon, whereas wooden swords were weaker than real steel. Leon said he could only pull that move off once, because his trump card only worked best the first time. If he relied on it, a genius like his opponent would read it, predict it, and easily counter it. Elcide asked if seeing his stats. A few days ago it hit him that hard. That night in the dormitory, he lay in bed thinking. He had been shocked that someone at the intermediate level could generate sword energy, and that blonde guy could even coat his body in aura. That placed him above even the instructors at a level most top-tier knights wouldn't reach until they were 30. After comparing their stats, Leon realized he trailed in strength and agility, but held a slight edge in stamina. Even so, he steeled his resolve, saying the protagonist was still someone he could defeat. One version of him always looked up while the other looked straight ahead. He needed to use that advice as a foundation, to win the duel against that other Leon. That thought excited him, and he asked LC, "If and only if I lose to the main character, what happens next?" So he told her, "I'll see what I can do." Curled up in bed, he silently apologized to Karen. He knew he probably couldn't do it, and this next duel would be the last. All he could think about was, "I need to go somewhere else." Feeling uneasy, he asked if this was too much for a first trial, but Elcide said this battle might determine the rest of his life. Lost in thought, he whispered, "Protagonist." The next day, a training dummy was smashed to pieces, and he broke another wooden sword, and Elcide wondered why such a perfect training sword couldn't hold up. She said the training process wasn't just to improve his technique. An elderly man said he knew the others weren't weak. Meanwhile, the blonde Leon stood watching the rain by the window. Leon said he could only perform that move once, because his trump card only worked best the first time. The main character told Lord Dealbert that it seemed he had finally accepted the results, recalling how skeptical he used to be about those assessments. El Cid asked if seeing his stats a few days ago had hit him that hard. It did not. The device showed that the blonde Leon had reached level 25, possessed countless skills, and was a swordmaster blessed with innate talent and noble blood. He was shocked that someone at the intermediate level could create sword energy, and that blonde guy could even coat his body in aura. That placed him above even the instructors at a level most talented knights would only reach by the age of 30. After comparing their stats, Leon realized he trailed in strength and agility, but had a bit more stamina. Still, he picked himself back up. He said the protagonist was still someone he could defeat. LZ liked that answer, and said she would teach him everything she could. He needed to use that advice as a foundation to win the duel against that other Leon, and that thought excited him. He asked El Cid, "If and only if I lose to the main character, what happens next?" That question surprised El Cid, but she refused to answer. Then the young man called for Lord Rupert and made a request, thinking to himself, "I will defeat the protagonist and make him my knight at any cost." She reminded him that she had warned him from the very beginning. The trials ahead would be far harsher than the opportunities he had been given. Feeling uneasy, he asked if this was too much for a first trial. But El Cid said this battle might determine his entire life. Filled with tension, he said it felt as if the heavens themselves were paving the way for this battle. El Cid replied that a hero was betting his whole future, so of course even the heavens had to react. A day passed with the main character training without rest, until the sky tore open and a heavy downpour began. Elsewhere, someone said the results were better than expected. An elderly man said he knew those others weren't weak. While the blonde Leon stood watching the rain by the window, LZ said he just wanted to humiliate him in front of the crowd, and Leon let out a tense laugh. The main character told Lord Dealbus that it seemed he had finally accepted the results, recalling how skeptical he used to be about those assessments. The old man smiled and said that was 3 years ago. For someone with talent, 3 years is more than enough, as he had already defeated Account's 2 sons without using aura, so there was no reason to doubt his potential anymore. Afterward, he added that Leon had sent word today that he was ready. Because the blonde protagonist thought he liked Karen, he intended to use this duel to push her toward himself. Elsis explained that battles over a woman between a ruler and a subordinate were nothing new. Then the young man called for Lord Rupert and made a request, thinking, "I will defeat the protagonist and make him my knight at any cost," and even more than that. His mind drifted toward Karen while the rain kept pouring down on the academy. He remembered moments he spent alone with the protagonist back when they sat under the tree and the duel agreement they had made, including the clause that the loser must serve the winner. Filled with tension, he said it felt as if the heavens themselves were paving the way for this battle. Elzid replied that a hero betting his entire future would naturally make even the heavens react. That is exactly the kind of calculated move the protagonist would make. He would go through with it even if it ignored his true desires or Karen's. He had suspected it before, but now he was certain the protagonist was a true high-ranking noble, someone who uses people's emotions and relationships like pieces on a chessboard. He wanted a match without an audience so he could focus completely, unlike the fights previously held here. Elzid said Leon only wanted to humiliate him in front of a crowd, and Leon gave a tense laugh. The instructor continued saying that without an audience there would be only one single observer. Besides the witness, he said this should never have happened, and now he would teach that fool a lesson. Soon the 2 boys were standing in the ring before the referee. The protagonist asked if he knew, then guessed it was Karen. This made him even more tense. Then the protagonist glanced around and asked where the observer was, saying he heard he had invited someone because the blonde protagonist thought he liked Karen. He intended to use this duel to push her toward himself, Elzid explained. That battles over a woman between a ruler and a subordinate are nothing new. Our hero looked at him with an indifferent gaze and asked if that was really the case. If he lost this match, he would become the protagonist's subordinate. That thought immediately made his blood boil. He recalled the moments spent alone with the protagonist, recalling when they sat under the tree and the duel agreement they made, including the clause that the loser must serve the winner. That alone was reason enough for Karen to be present there as an observer. Even if he promised not to use it, it could still trigger on its own, and he didn't want that to decide the match. That is exactly the kind of calculated move the protagonist would make. He would go through with it even if it ignored his true desires or Karen's. He had suspected it before, but now he was certain the protagonist was a true high-ranking noble, someone who uses people's emotions and relationships like pieces on a chessboard. If that was the true face of the nobility, then Leon felt truly nauseated. Elzid noticed his two hands were clenched tight. She pointed out that he was angry, and the protagonist admitted it. He said that this should never have happened, and now he would teach that fool a lesson. Soon the two boys were standing in the ring before the referee. With a faint smile, the blonde Leon said he was late, but he replied with a sharp, cold look that it was actually him who had arrived early. Then the protagonist glanced around and asked where the observer was, saying he heard he had invited someone. Smiling, the referee said the observer was watching from a place out of sight so that nothing could distract him. No one could blame the result on a wrong decision. Our hero looked at him with an indifferent gaze and asked if that was really true. Then he said they should start right away. But Leon interrupted him, took out a pill, and swallowed it immediately. Our hero frowned and asked what he had just taken. Leon said it was a pill to seal his aura. Leon assumed he had used Rodrigo's vision, but his movements looked blurrier than anyone our hero had ever fought. So he told himself to calm down. What the vision missed, he would make up for with all the times they had crossed swords before. Even as the protagonist kept up the pressure, the instructor handed them their weapons and asked if they were ready. Both warriors took their stances. Our hero could see the protagonist was very serious, completely different from his usual demeanor. However, when it came to focus, he wouldn't lose either. The whistle blew and their swords clashed. Leon lunged fiercely while our hero struggled to defend. Clearly feeling the pressure, a slash tore through the hero's chest armor, but the protagonist was stunned to see a lock of his own hair severed by the counterattack. Despite that, our hero realized he had miscalculated the amount of strength he could withstand. Gasping for air, our hero realized the reason why his attacks felt weaker after the first strike. Leon immediately attacked again, even harder than before. Our hero had to struggle just to fend that off. Seeing our hero catch his breath, that slight smirk made him wonder if he was walking straight into a trap. His blade moved as fast as a whip. He quickly realized his opponent was far beyond anyone he'd faced before, and that wasn't all. Leon figured he must be using Rodrigo's vision. But his movements looked blurrier than anyone our hero had ever fought, so he told himself to calm down and pick up what his eyes might have missed. He would make up for it by relying on all those times they had crossed swords before. Even as the protagonist kept up the pressure, Rupert found it hard to believe that students could fight at this level. He knew he had to crush that will first, or he'd never be able to break his opponent, so he unleashed one of his ultimate techniques even without using aura. Their swordsmanship might even be better than some knights. Our hero gritted his teeth under that crushing pressure. Our protagonist recalled the technique's effect. It forces muscles and blood flow to work harder, pushing the body past its normal limits, but he knew it wouldn't be complete without aura. Yet even at half power, it was enough. He always knew his young master was a genius, but never thought anyone the same age could keep up. Leon lunged with a devastating blow, and the protagonist still managed to parry it away. Our hero felt a second layer hidden within that attack. He widened his eyes to read it and thrust forward just as his opponent attacked. A slash tore through the hero's chest armor, but the protagonist was stunned. Seeing a lock of his own hair severed by the counterattack, our hero regained his stance while Leon irritably checked his own hair. Panting, our hero realized why his attacks felt weaker after that first exchange. The protagonist realized it too. Once he calmed down, he asked if that was really the case. And Elsid replied that the human body is capable of more than people think. He watched our hero catch his breath, that slight smirk making him wonder. He wondered if he was walking straight into a trap, so he couldn't afford to be reckless. Before he could think further, Leon closed the distance again, determined to stay right on him. Wear him out and slowly seize control. One mistake would ruin the whole plan. There was nothing flashy here, just a stubborn, burning desire to win, and he could feel it clearly. He knew he had to crush that will first, or he'd never be able to break his opponent, so he unleashed one of his ultimate techniques. Leon remained focused. But now tension had started to creep into him. Leon was using Speed Step, a royal secret technique under that pressure. Our protagonist recalled the effect it forces muscles and blood flow to work harder, pushing the body past its normal limits, but he knew it wouldn't be complete without aura. Yet even at half power, it was enough. Our protagonist also countered, pushing his own senses to the absolute limit. Leon lunged with a devastating blow, and the protagonist still parried it away. He felt the strike lacked depth, and wondered why the whole atmosphere had changed, yet no one should have been able to break his speed. Clutching his aching arm, the protagonist asked if that was really his true speed and if he was truly not using any aura at all. Holding his ground to protect his small advantage and stamina, he waited for Leon's speed to burn him out. There was absolutely no aura involved. Startled, the protagonist jumped back. After calming down, he asked if that was the truth. And else had said the human body can do more than one might think. There are techniques for increasing speed, but also techniques for enhancing strength and stamina, so he couldn't be too hasty. Before he could think further, Leon closed in again, angrily growling, "How can you stay so calm while doing that?" Feeling the blow, the protagonist retorted that he could ask the same thing sarcastically, wondering if he was now only able to rely on that secret sword technique. This is who he truly is, no matter what he would make him his subordinate, and he continued to use speed step, the referee thought to himself. He should have been reaching his limit after using that move so many times without aura. Leon remained focused, but now tension was appearing in him. Our protagonist saw it clearly. If that guy was a true hero, this much wouldn't stop him. Our protagonist remembered everything they had been through and thought, "Hey, main character, do you still not get it? The real difference between them isn't natural talent, but the fact that he swings his sword to practice every single day." Rupert was completely shocked by this change. The whole atmosphere had changed, yet his speed shouldn't have been breakable by anyone. Until now, the protagonist still believed there was only one way to win. Holding his ground to protect his small advantage and stamina, he waited for Leon's speed to exhaust him because his own strength was acceleration. Smirking, he muttered that this wasn't fun at all. The protagonist agreed and explained that the key was a technique he learned from Lionel's sword flick. The protagonist narrowed his focus. The only thing he needed to believe in was the strength, which these very hands had forged. After that, he added that the most important thing was the difference in the number of swords each of them had broken, watching Leon collapse to the ground. You say talent is what pushes Leon's body beyond its limits, but you're the one who truly understands the limits of a sword. No matter what happens, that's just who you are. You were going to make him your subordinate and keep using your speed. The referee thinks to himself he should have hit his limit by now after using that move so many times without any aura. Elsid seems to be enjoying every bit of this. The victory belongs to the one who should have been Leon's subordinate. If that guy is a true hero, this shouldn't be enough to stop him. The protagonist recalls everything they've been through and thinks to himself, "Hey, main character, do you still not get it? The real difference between them isn't natural talent. It's the fact that he swings his sword in training every single day." The storm outside continues to rage. The protagonist lunges in, Leon charges, and the battle begins. He explains that he hasn't thought of anything yet, so he'll tell him once he comes up with it. The protagonist is shocked and stunned to see his own weapon shattered. Both the protagonist and Rupert are caught off guard. Then he smiles and says, "All right, deal." The protagonist feels his whole body aching and thinks to himself that even without using his acceleration skill, he pushed himself too far because his opponent was Leon. The protagonist agrees and explains the key point. The point is a technique he learned from Lionel's sword strike. It's a strange sword stance. It disrupts the upper body's rhythm. He recalls the moment that strike landed during the match. Then he adds that the most important thing is the difference. It's in the number of swords each person has broken. Looking at Leon lying on the ground, he says that talent pushes Leon's body beyond its limits, but he understands the limits of a sword. If they had used real swords, the outcome might have been different. He thanks her for being the supervisor, but Karen looks sad, her eyes welling up with tears. She says she absolutely cannot understand him or Leon, and asks if this means that he really lost. Rubus claps and announces the result, the victory. It belongs to the one who should have been Leon's subordinate. Then she suddenly asks if he plans to leave the academy, which catches him off guard. Leon remembers his own promise to accept any request as long as it doesn't harm his honor or his family. After thinking for a moment, the protagonist realizes he doesn't really want anything. The protagonist admits he lost, and since he chose this match, he has to accept the result. Annoyed, Karen snaps that he has no right to say that, especially since he never intended to listen to her in the first place. He's always like that, constantly overcoming things people think are impossible, and in the end, he always pulls it off. The protagonist says, "Actually, it all happened pretty fast considering the difficulty level, not making a big deal out of it." He says he'll decide later, which surprises Leon immensely. He explains that he hasn't thought of anything yet, so he'll let him know when he does. A moment later, both of them can't help but burst out laughing. Both the protagonist and Rupert are shocked and stunned. Then he smiles and says, "All right, deal." The protagonist feels his whole body aching and thinks to himself that even without using his acceleration skill, he pushed himself too far because his opponent was Leon. He says the protagonist might be able to hide it, but maybe he's breaking down and still trying to accept this defeat. So if his girlfriend chases after him, that beating might actually help him grow from this failure. Please go soothe the wounded one. Chloe just stands there silently as he leaves. Then she suddenly calls his name and asks what he will do after leaving the academy. Excited, the protagonist says he feels better. That's exactly what he expected from a Tier 4 healing spell. Elsid says she never expected a mage who doesn't believe in gods to go around praying for others. With teary eyes, she says she absolutely cannot understand him or Leon, and asks if this means he really lost. The protagonist is a bit confused by her reaction. He says he always wanted to be someone special, and Elsid asks what he means by special. Then she suddenly asks if he plans to leave the academy, which catches him off guard. He asks how she knew. Karen says she understands him too well and calls him an idiot. Even so, he still couldn't overcome barriers like status and talent and had lost his way. When comparing himself to those geniuses, annoyed Karen snaps that he has no right to say that, especially since he never intended to listen to her in the first place. He's always like that, constantly overcoming things people think are impossible, and in the end, he always pulls it off. The protagonist says that actually it all happened pretty fast considering the difficulty. Karen retorts that it was way too long. While she is still fuming about that, the protagonist starts to laugh. Leon asks, "Is it just because I wanted some wealth and fame?" He says he's fine now and tells her to go beat Leon up instead. He says ambition is a core part of being human and dreams are what help us keep moving forward. He says the protagonist might be able to hide it, but maybe he's breaking down and still trying to accept this defeat. So if his girlfriend chases after him, that beating might actually help him grow from this failure. After saying that he tells her to leave Leon to her, Chloe just stands there silently as he leaves. Then out of the blue, she calls your name and asks what you'll do after leaving the academy. You wave back and say it's a secret for now. Elvis reveals that you are actually the true descendant, the true heir to the royal lineage of the Clyde Empire, the sword that carries the duty to revive the fallen empire. Elsid says she never expected a mage who doesn't believe in gods to be out here praying for someone else. Leon replies that she really is a kind person, then adds that the other guy sounds like the textbook definition of a perfect protagonist. And if he was fated to be the hero, then perhaps he isn't anymore. You say you've always wanted to be someone special, and Elsid asks what you mean by special. The protagonist explains that he poured his heart and soul into everything he had. Even so, he still couldn't overcome barriers like status and talent and lost his way while comparing himself to those geniuses. But after meeting Elsid, things in his life took a turn for the better. Elsid pulled him out of the self-doubt buried deep in his heart and helped him step out from the shadows of those two. And now it's time for him to become a hero. Elsid asks if he feels guilty for stealing that guy's opportunity. But he says not at all because that protagonist was born with everything handed to him. Elsid looks at him and remarks that he's quite the pragmatist. Leon asks, "Is it just because I want a bit of wealth and fame?" What's wrong with wanting to be famous? You say ambition is a core part of being human, and dreams are what keep us moving forward as long as we don't stray onto the wrong path. Ambition is part of what makes us who we are. You add that the spirit of Rodrigo chose you, and the Holy Sword chose you too, the one destined by fate to be a hero, not Leon. Finally, Elsid lets out a satisfied sigh. Stunned, you ask what Elsid means. Elsid reveals that you are actually the true descendant of the royal line of the Clyde Empire, the sword that carries the mission to restore the fallen empire. She also says that your battle with Elman's group has pushed both nobles and commoners to strive harder, and it has changed the entire academy. So everything is settled. Maybe the main character won't need to return to the academy anymore. You say the other guy sounds like a perfect protagonist, and if he was fated to be the hero, perhaps he is no longer. Leon asks, "Is that really so?" reminding Elsid that the duel was meant to test you. Elsid nods and says you passed. There is no rule stating a hero must be chosen by prophecy or holy decree. If a person carves out their own future with their own strength and will, that is just as worthy. You stop panting and shout that finally. I've escaped that hellish forest. You reflect on that thought. Elsid asks if you feel guilty for stealing that guy's chance. But you say not at all because that protagonist was born with everything. Elsid asks what you mean by hellish forest and tells Leon he should actually be grateful. That's impossible. With a biting, sarcastic tone, you reply that you're so grateful you could cry just from getting out of there. Afterwards, the MC says that the failure was the guy's own fault, losing to someone like you, someone who started with nothing while he had every advantage. It was the first time you camped in the forest and the goblins attacked non-stop. You add that the spirit of Rodrigo chose you and the Holy Sword chose you. Leon faced every challenge and used those 15 days to get comfortable and train with the Holy Sword. Finally, Elsid lets out a satisfied sigh. The protagonist thanks her for the training and complains that those goblins were a real pain. From the very beginning, Elsid asks if you could take down 10 of them in under 10 seconds, and adds that even if you could, it would only be thanks to the footwork drills. She also says that the protagonist's battle with Elman's group pushed both nobles and commoners to work harder, changing the whole academy. Elsid says you sound fired up, but tells you to wait for the right moment. This makes the protagonist curious. Elsid explains that you are still like a vessel being molded, and defeating monsters to increase your power is what fills that vessel. If the vessel isn't finished yet, anything poured in will just leak out and all your effort will be wasted. It passes through the forest under the clear blue sky. Long after approaching the city walls, they finally arrive. You stop panting and shout that finally you've escaped that hellish forest. You say you're glad entering the city went smoothly, and that everyone actually believed the Academy ID card. This audio was generated using AI technology from vb.vn. After that, Elsid casually mentions this city. Elsid asks what you meant by hellish forest, and tells Leon he should be grateful. That place became a perfect training ground for you, with biting sarcasm. As you reply that you're so grateful you could cry just to have escaped. They spent the last 15 days crossing that forest on the way there. It was your first time camping in the woods, and the goblins kept attacking under those harsh conditions. Elsid let you use the Holy Sword, instead of the wooden sword you brought from the Academy. Leon faced every challenge and used those 15 days to get comfortable and train with the Holy Sword. Elsid says you still took longer than expected, a whole week. The protagonist thanks her for the training and complains that those goblins were a real headache from the start. Elsid asked if you could take down 10 people in under 10 seconds. And added that even if you could, it would only be thanks to the footwork training. Leon felt that he was definitely stronger now than when he first stepped into that forest. And if he could decide for himself, he would start clearing out monsters from now on. Elsid said you sounded full of spirit, but told you to wait for the right moment, which made the protagonist curious. Elsid explained that you were still like a vessel being molded, and exterminating monsters to strengthen yourself was exactly what would fill that vessel. If the vessel wasn't complete, yet anything poured in would just leak out and all your efforts would be in vain. Leon silently thought that besides training in the forest, he had also learned many things about Elsid because Elsid appeared a year earlier than the prophecy, so most of her holy sword powers were sealed. Usually a holy sword user would recover quickly, be nearly immortal, have significantly enhanced physical abilities, and could use aura and divine power. But since Leon still couldn't use aura, you would need to become much stronger to unleash the full power of the sword. Late that afternoon, at the Adventurers Guild, a girl thanked you for registering under the protagonist's name. She said she had checked the Academy records and the recommendation letter from Humut, so you would start at rank D. The protagonist asked if she was Rice, and wanted to know what rank D meant. She explained that it determined the jobs you could take, though you would quickly rank up. To reach rank B, you need to prove you can use aura weapons, and reaching rank A or S would take more time in a city of this size. It's quite disorganized, and the security around here is no better than just being able to circulate it. Aura weapons prove you can control aura outside your body. A sword strong enough to crush stone and cut through steel that is only the beginning of true superhuman power. He thought if that only got him to rank B, then ranks A and S must surely be on a completely different level. It's better to register early while not in a rush, and Elsid agreed since you had said you wanted to become an adventurer. Leon then realized a few people were staring at him, including some catfolk and others who looked like elves. He had no interest in being dragged into wars or fighting for noble power. Furthermore, he wanted to use the privileges of a hero, so monster hunting quests sounded best. Elsid said it would still be a long time before her seal was lifted. Leon silently thought that besides training in the forest, he had also learned many things about Elsid because Elsid appeared 1 year earlier than the prophecy, so most of her holy sword powers were sealed. Usually, a holy sword user would recover quickly, be nearly immortal, and have significantly enhanced physical abilities, and could use aura and divine power. But because Leon still couldn't use aura, he would need to become much stronger to unleash the full power of the sword. Late that afternoon at the Adventurers Guild, a girl thanked you for registering under the protagonist's name. She said she had checked the academy records and the letter of recommendation from Helmut so you would start at rank D. The protagonist asked if she was Rice and wanted to know what rank D meant. She explained that it determined the jobs you could take, though you would quickly rank up. To reach rank B, you need to prove you can use aura weapons, and to reach rank A or S takes more time than that. Leon couldn't believe it required aura. It didn't just stop at being able to circulate it. Aura weapons prove you can control aura outside your body, a sword strong enough to crush stone and cut through steel. That is where true superhuman power begins. He thought if that only got him to rank B, then ranks A and S must surely be on a completely different level. Elsid said this organization was more interesting than he thought, and realized there were many demi-human races here. Leon then noticed a few people were staring at him, including some catfolk and others who looked like elves. Elsid pointed out the werewolves, spirits, and even high spirits. He couldn't believe that races that had been slaughtering each other 300 years ago were now working together. Whoever founded this organization surely must be someone extremely capable. Rice smiled and asked if there was a problem. Leon sheepishly said it was nothing, and she told him it was okay. Then she reported that the registration process was complete, but to become an official adventurer, you must complete an unpaid quest. The protagonist was stunned. No reward. So that's no different from working for free? He asked if there was really no reward at all, and Rice replied that was correct. You must gain the guild's approval before being recognized as a true adventurer. Every recognition has its price. Elsid said that's how this world works, and Leon told him to shut up. Not long after, under the city's sewers, dark tunnels stretched out ahead. The protagonist ran through the foul-smelling water fighting off the monsters while completing his first mission. He said this was his first time using a sword to fight rats. Elsid reminded him that his swordsmanship was built for one-on-one combat. So when facing these things, the only answer is to keep cutting them down. He added that there was no better training than fighting every type of enemy, whether they came from the ground or the sky. Leon thought Elsid was the last person who should be giving that kind of advice. Elsid said there was no way to escape it. You had already accepted the job of cleaning the sewer, so you had to finish it. That only made him more annoyed. But he continued to fight, and finally wiped them all out until something unusual caught his attention. He pointed deep into the nest and told Elsid to look. Why did that rat man have horns? Elsid explained that it was an evolved type Leon wondered about. That so, he added that some monsters would mutate after living long enough or absorbing large amounts of energy. He said it was similar to a hobgoblin, and the protagonist immediately asked, "Does that mean it's extremely dangerous?" Elsid tells you that the horn proves it possesses a special ability, and the larger or more numerous the horns, the more dangerous that power is to human-rat hybrids. Suddenly it gathers energy into the tip of its horn, making the protagonist tense up. He hurriedly asks if there's any way to know what kind of power it wields. Elsid says it's better if Leon experiences it firsthand, though he adds that the creature's power is actually quite useless. When asked what he means, Elsid explains that the ability is a curse. The protagonist silently raises his holy sword, and with a roar, the creature releases its power, firing a cursed plague straight at him. The curse strikes the holy sword, and vanishes the moment it touches it. Triumphantly, Leon says it didn't do a thing, and the rat man chose the wrong opponent today. Burning with intensity, he tells the creature to hand over that horn. A while later, back at the Adventurers Guild, the protagonist arrives carrying a bulging sack. The receptionist jumps in surprise when he tosses the heavy bag onto the counter, staring at it. She asks if all of those are Ratman tails. There are 23 kilograms of tails here. Leon calculates in his head that it means 230 Ratmen, and tells her she guessed perfectly. Then he places another bundle down containing several horns. He says those are the horns from the Ratmen. Out of about 200 killed, only 3 or 4 had them. So he asks if the guild can buy those as well. She freezes for a moment, and he has to call out to her. Finally, she nods nervously and totals everything up to 13 silver and 50 copper coins. Leon says that's more than he expected. Rice explains that these horns are very rare and sell for a high price. She adds that no one has ever brought back this much from their first mission, and she is truly impressed. The protagonist, confused, asks if it's really that big of a deal. She replies that just one rat man would have been enough to surprise her. But taking down 4 evolved ones at his age proves his skills must be extraordinary. She compliments him as amazing, and the protagonist feels very happy. He's just too shy to show it. Finally, she offers her congratulations, Leon. From this moment on, you are officially a D-rank adventurer, and the seal on your badge marks the free city of Belen. He asks if he can use it anywhere. Rice nods, but explains that adventurers rank B and below will have lower priority when taking jobs at other branches. As the protagonist examines the badge, and she explains that it's to prevent people from just taking the easy jobs they like. He replies that he understands holding the badge in his hand. He realizes this is proof that he is no longer just an academy student. He is an adventurer. Rice tells Leon that if he has any special requests, he should just ask her. Even though she doesn't have much authority, she might still be able to help with something. The protagonist smiles, looking at the badge in his hand, and as he leaves the guild that afternoon, he thinks this might be useful. Elcid sounds very happy about something and says the receptionist seems to have mistaken him for a holy knight, which startles him. He asks why. Elcid points out that the protagonist chose a difficult job with meager pay, and in the past, knights often traveled like that before their identities were revealed. So for someone like the protagonist, that guess isn't entirely wrong. Then Leon blinks. Are you serious? Elcid says she'll probably faint one day if she finds out the truth, but adds that he can't just blurt it out. Elcid laughs and says to imagine a receptionist assigned to support a hero for the next few decades, she would become a guild legend. She could probably live comfortably just by writing a book about it. But the protagonist insists that he never lied. She was just jumping to her own conclusions. Thinking it over, Leon realizes this is actually no different from a journey to help people. Since he will be staying in Belen for a while, this seems much better, compared to living in suspicion, so he tells Elcid that he plans to leave only after reaching rank B. That surprises Elcid. Then Leon asks how long it takes to reach rank B. Elcid replies immediately 100 days is enough. The protagonist is clearly surprised, but Elcid says he originally intended to go easy on him for half a year. But it seems that won't be happening anymore, even with this training. He still can't believe his successor is ranking up by cleaning sewers. He thinks it's truly shameful, while Leon thinks at least it brings in some money, and wonders what kind of twisted logic that is. Elcid says Leon needs to become as strong as possible, and ultimately defeat at least one dragon. The protagonist panics. He asks why the goalpost has been pushed so far away so quickly. But Elcid says the protagonist has learned the foundations of vision and footwork. Now he will hone them through actual combat. Above all, he has a special advantage. He can absorb the power of the monsters he defeats. Simply put, he will accumulate experience points. Leon realizes this must be the connection between the monsters and the aura. Elcid had mentioned it before. He recalls the energy he felt after killing those monsters, and thinks that the ancient training methods and elixirs from the nobility surely helped increase his aura. Elcid says the truth is that anyone can absorb it. The power of monsters and the ability to convert it into aura, ancient nobles and royalty hid that secret away to keep it as their own exclusive privilege. The protagonist figures that most of those who buried that knowledge are dead now, and only Elcid truly understands the full truth. Dealing with monsters has become easier, but even 1,000 rat men wouldn't be much of a challenge, Elcid says now that Leon has grown accustomed to the process. You'll move on to stronger prey and eventually even a dragon. The protagonist, shocked, asks if he's actually serious. Elcid snaps back that of course he's serious. Your sword isn't some kind of cleaning tool after all. Does it really make sense to pull it out just to purify the air and tidy things up? You recall the time you asked Elcid to cleanse you after crawling out of the sewers, and true enough, with that incredible power, Elcid did help get you spotless, but it's clear he's not letting that matter slide. So Leon asks why he's so determined to hunt dragons, and Elcid explains that one day they will have to travel to the Titan Mountains. The protagonist turns pale. The Titan Mountains are dragon territory, and he would never intentionally go anywhere near that place as it's ruled by giant kings. Basically, it's the demon realm. He asks why they have to go to a place that not even the ancient kingdoms could conquer. Elcid says Leon will be able to help. His body was left behind there. And since he's lost his memories, he can't recall much, so their goal is to reach that land within 6 months. The protagonist ponders, then asks if they are really going to head there. Just to search for something that Elcid doesn't even remember. Elcid replies that it will be just fine. They won't waste any time between now and then. You just need to become strong enough to protect yourself. With a confident smile, Elcid tells him to trust him. After all, he is the Holy Sword. That finally makes the protagonist smile, and he agrees, noting that nothing he's trusted so far has let him down. Elcid immediately says that means Hellish training starts right now, and the protagonist is terrified. A while later at the Adventurers Guild, two guys are mocking someone sarcastically asking if that cat is going hunting for ratmen again today. The guy being mocked snaps back asking who they just called a cat, then calls them idiots. The other guy says he heard the kid racks up kills every single day. He assumes that because he became famous for hunting ratmen, the guild nicknamed him the Cat. Approaching the counter, he dumps another bulging bag of loot on it. Rice smiles and says this haul is a bit smaller than usual, doesn't it? The protagonist agrees, saying there weren't many ratmen around this time, and only a few jumped out to attack him. He guesses those things are starting to fear him. Rice replies that ratmen might look stupid, but they do have a bit of intelligence. Leon says that's why he wants to look at other jobs. She spreads out some papers, excitedly saying she knew this day would come. So she handpicked 4 quests for him. The protagonist and Elsid look them over, busy thinking about which one to take. Then suddenly one quest catches his eye. Looking closer, he realizes these request papers seem very old, and Elsid says that means nobody wants to take this job. And it has never been renewed either. Leon grins and says this is the one he's taking this quest. A while later, while walking around the city, he says this mission is to hunt stone slimes that live underground near the wall because they eat the stones. He wonders if this request really came from the captain of the Brain Defensive Guard, and says there's no way someone like that would try to take advantage of him. When Leon reaches a small gate on the city wall, he shows the guard his request paper. The guard is confused and says this is a stone slime extermination mission, but he never requested that. The protagonist asks how that could be. Since this paper is an official guild request, the defensive guard captain says there must have been some kind of mix-up. Then someone suddenly steps forward and asks if Leon is the adventurer who cleared out the ratmen in the sewers so efficiently. The protagonist replies that's right. It's him, and the man praises him, saying they need more adventurers like that. The man grumbles that those other guys just choose the easy jobs. While still calling themselves adventurers, he asks the boy, isn't that ridiculous? A moment later, the protagonist moves inside the city wall. He recalls the man's words that if he does well, there will be a bonus, so he decides to give it his all. Even so, Leon still feels uneasy. The way the man spoke made this job sound very difficult. Elsid says the extra reward sounds great, but the protagonist points out that this place is damp and slippery, so it won't be easy without sword skills. The sword calls this the perfect place to train footwork, and the protagonist quickly tells him, slow down. 3 slimes ahead were bouncing down the hallway with a clatter. You exclaimed, there are 3 of them, and Elsid snapped, use your eyes. He reminded the protagonist that if these were just regular slimes, other adventurers wouldn't have avoided this quest. The protagonist understood what he meant, but suddenly a rock appeared right in front of him. It flew so fast he barely had time to dodge before it slammed hard into the wall. The MC asked in a panic, where did that even come from? Elsid told him to look ahead. A slime was charging straight at him. Almost by reflex, he swung his sword. He blocked the impact, but the force still sent his sword. Recoiling, caught off guard, he realized that's why they were called rock slimes. Elsid remarked that Leon should have known this, but every slime has a weak point, the core. If you destroy the core in the center, the whole slime collapses no matter the type. That was the rule. The protagonist focused and saw the creature filled with stone shards, layer upon layer of rock, shielding the core. For a slime. Its structure was incredibly sturdy. Elsid said that's exactly why adventurers hate dealing with them. Blunt weapons are better at breaking through their defenses. Swords and bows might work well on regular slimes, but these ones hide their weakness behind stone fragments, making it a nightmare to use standard weapons. To fight them. Suddenly, the pack of slimes began attacking, spitting stones at Leon. A barrage of rocks surrounded him, and he had to use his holy sword to deflect them. Even then, the slimes kept closing in. Clearly, the MC was in big trouble. Elsid pointed out that they knew he couldn't block every shot, so they were aiming for his vitals. Then he asked Leon, what did you learn from that attack? He replied that they were shooting from over 5 meters away, creating a small opening before the next volley. If he closed the distance, he could land 1 or 2 hits, but there was still a problem: he couldn't pierce their defenses yet. He needed a way to dodge the debris and strike the core. Then he rethought it. Wait, no. I need to slash through it. Elsid looked surprised as Leon realized that with his improved vision, he could time the moment the stone fragments inside their bodies shifted, and thrust his holy sword right through the gap. The hard part was that the fragments never stopped moving, so finding that gap wouldn't be simple. Even so, the protagonist smiled. He asked if a moment of danger. could also be an opportunity. Elzid explained that when a rock slime opens up to fire stones, the flow of the slime inside pauses for a split second. For someone with Leon's ability, that is the most perfect moment to destroy the core. The MC asked if that was why he chose this mission, and Elzid replied, of course. Fueled with determination, he said, all right, I'll give it a shot. And then he lunged toward the pack of slimes with his holy sword ready. As he got close, he activated the vision he had trained. With a single clean slash, he split a slime in half and crushed its core. He quickly realized that if his timing was off by even a little bit, he would be the one taking the hit. Elzid said the slimes sense movement through vibrations, so Leon needed to lighten his footsteps. The slimes kept pressuring him, firing rocks incessantly. Elzid told him this was the time to use his footwork. The protagonist began weaving through their attacks. As he drew closer, the excited MC realized he could actually do this, just as Elzid said if he trusted his own movements. But then a mishap occurred. Leon slipped. He barely had time to think about what was happening before spotting a cluster of rocks flying diagonally toward him from the side. He applied what he had practiced, and with all his might regained his balance, just in time to dodge the oncoming rocks. At the same time, his trained vision caught the core of another slime perfectly. He destroyed it without a second's hesitation. Not long after the hallway was littered with the remains of the slimes, Elzid said, I suppose you didn't do that on purpose? But it was effective nonetheless. He asked what he was talking about. Elzid said it was what the protagonist just did. That was level 2 of his footwork technique. Stunned, the MC asked, what? Elzid explained that level 2 begins with keeping your balance on flat ground while minimizing vibrations. And later you must also know how to take advantage of whatever is under your feet, whether it's ice, stone, heat, or anything else. The real core is adapting to the terrain and turning a harsh environment into your advantage. Even if it was just luck, Leon had lowered his center of gravity by spreading his legs wide. Elzid asked, isn't that exactly what happened? By giving up his normal upright stance, he gained the flexibility to move in any direction. Elzid said, when the ground changes, the protagonist's stance must change too. Until now, his stance and way of moving were only suited for smooth, flat ground. In a place like this, with low ceilings and slippery floors, he needed a style suited to that space. Leon admitted that the lower stance really did make moving easier. Elzid asked, isn't real combat training better? The MC called him a demon sword. And Elzid retorted, what the hell are you babbling about? He thought, this is only level 2, I can't believe this. Is considered training for a beginner. His sword added that thinking back, Leon shouldn't even be dodging every attack anymore, even though he'd grown accustomed to the footwork. That left the protagonist stunned. Elzid asked if a simple stone slime could really kill him. He didn't say it was better to learn how to take less damage if it helps in real combat. He said the MC needs to learn to use his body to take hits instead of desperately trying to block everything and failing. He also warned him not to rely only on explosive techniques. If you find the right timing, you can cut them down cleanly, and explosive moves won't help much when there are only 1 or 2 enemies left. The protagonist was annoyed, telling the magic sword to just come out and say it wanted him dead already. Elzid replied that it was for the protagonist's own good. Besides, if you get too comfortable now, you'll pay the price for it later. The MC retorted that he wasn't comfortable at all. Why keep pushing him this hard? Elzid said that by his standards, he had already achieved that. Back then, everyone was watching the wall entrance. A guard said 3 weeks had passed and asked when he went in. The other replied before 10 o'clock before the second shift. He remarked that the kid was really hard-working, saying that at first he couldn't even handle the stone slimes, but now he comes out with a full bag every time, even though the reward isn't worth much. The people waiting nearby pointed and said, he's coming out. Leon emerged from inside with a stern face carrying 2 big bags of slime remains, which impressed everyone. Leon said today was the last day, and one of the guards gave a strained smile. Dion explained that he had cleared out the areas near the wall, and because these slimes breed slowly, they wouldn't cause trouble for a while. He pointed to the bags and said these were the last stone slime fragments, and asked them to report to the guild that the mission was completed. The soldiers looked at each other, staring at the bags stuffed with slime debris as he left. He asked if that meant he was ready. Elzid replied yes. After all the strength gained from hunting stone slimes, it was time to move to the next stage, learning to use aura. Later at the inn, Elzid said things were moving faster than he expected. He thought Leon would need to absorb a significant amount of power first, since slimes are creatures formed from magic, but because no one had touched that task in so long, the training progressed much faster than expected. Now he could finally start learning aura. Else had mentioned that he was starting later than most people. Then he asked if he was ready. Leon replied without hesitation. Of course, children from noble families like him usually go through a baptism at birth to open their magic circuits. And they accumulate magic power using elixirs. That is a major reason why status creates a gap in power. Previously developing aura without going through a baptism was almost unthinkable. Else had added a warning if someone who had already undergone a baptism tried to force open magic circuits blocked by impurities. Their body could collapse, leading to death. That made him nervous, but Else had reminded him that he had been constantly absorbing magic power all this time. And more importantly, he had the Holy Sword. The sword's power would protect his magic circuits and heal the damage as soon as it happened, but the pain would be excruciating, and Leon had to grit his teeth and endure it. Else had warned that if he passed out, the baptism would fail. Whether this succeeds or not completely depends on his will. Then Else had began to use his power right in front of him. Leon nervously watched those streams of light. As they turned into swords of light, one suddenly lunged down and pierced through his back. He screamed and coughed up blood still writhing on the floor. With a sword of light stuck in his back, he saw countless other swords begin to fly toward him. Then all of them plunged down simultaneously. Leon used all his strength to stay conscious. But the pain was clearly visible throughout his entire body as he witnessed this. Else had seemed amazed to see that he could endure 10 swords of light. Despite being severely wounded, the boy clung to the ground and continued to resist. Elcid looked out the window and realized that now that his aura had awakened, those hiding in the city had become much easier to sense. Late that night at the inn, Leon finally spoke the word aura. He could feel that flow moving outside his body, and he noticed a pure stream of energy circulating through his heart. It felt like he had just gained a completely new type of strength, separate from his own physical power, and for a moment he felt that he could do anything now, but Elcid quickly said he was wrong, leaving Leon confused, thinking about Rodrigo Roderick Candias Elveve. Elcid secretly thought, "You really are amazing." And even though the awakening depended on internal strength, he still exceeded what he had expected. Then Elcid became pensive, asking why he seemed so gloomy. Even though he was the one training him and everything went smoothly, if he becomes stronger, isn't that a good thing? The problem lies in the method. He had even chosen a shortcut when letting him overcome it with the Holy Sword. If not for that, would he truly be the successor of Rodrigo Roderick Candias Elveve? He continued that Leon is the heir of Rodrigo, so he should keep other options for himself and ensure the previous hero is watching over him. From heaven, Elcid pointed at him and said there was still one more thing. He admitted he once thought the boy could only handle 5 ceremonial swords at most, considering he had only just cleared his main energy meridians. To master aura, he still needed to clear the smaller meridians at this stage. You're just a kid with more power than before, and you still have a long way to go. Leon scratched his head and said he knew that. But even though his body hadn't changed yet, he could clearly feel the flow of energy. Elcid told him that was the aura sense, and if he learned how to focus that flow, he would be able to grasp everything around him. His eyes lit up upon hearing that. To him, it sounded absolutely awesome. Elcid said he understood why the boy was so excited, but first he needed to explain the nature of aura, starting with a fact. Every aura has an attribute. Most people possess one of the 5 common types: earth, beast, wood, fire, or water. Leon's didn't belong to any of those. Elcid said he was a bit surprised to see the boy awaken the same type of aura as his own. This made the boy even more curious and amazed. He asked if it was really identical to Elcid's. So that means Elcid cut him off and replied, "That's right." His aura carried the solar attribute, symbolizing light and heat. It was a rare, superior attribute linked to brilliance. Leon excitedly flopped back onto his bed. Thrilled to know he shared an attribute with the legendary hero Elcid, said he would show him a quick summary with just a snap of his fingers. He turned on the information device. It showed that the hero, having finally learned aura, was now at level 22 with many more skills than before. He was stunned. The display looked completely different, and he couldn't believe he had already reached level 3 in aura just after learning it. Elcid explained that Leon was already using acceleration before fully learning aura, and he could also use aura sense, because he had already done all that. He had already surpassed level 1 and level 2 from the start. He asked if that was really possible, and El Cid said his combat physique had also reached level 2 when the meridians were cleared, so now it was time to teach him the swordsmanship he was still lacking. That made him truly happy. Finally, he could learn the sword style of Rodrigo Roderick Candius. His eyes sparkled, and he asked if they should start right away. And El Cid laughed out loud because Leon was burning with determination. He said that was much better than having no motivation at all. But first, he needed to know one thing: this city was the enemy's den. At first, he didn't understand and asked what he meant. El Cid said he could sense them. Somewhere in the city, the old enemies of the hero, the traitors, were trying to hand over this world to entities from another dimension. They lurked in the shadow of the hero, in every era, just like a swarm of insects. A bit tense, Leon asked what they were called. El Cid replied he wouldn't waste a real name on scum like them. If he needed a name, call them Malice, an evil organization. He clenched his fists when thinking about the hero's enemies, but El Cid warned him that he wasn't capable of facing them head-on yet. So all I have to do is get stronger, right? Leon concluded. He had made up his mind. He would become a hero. El Cid stared at him for a moment, then explained that Malice would likely stay quiet for now. But they didn't have forever. At most, they had 2 months to act. Hunting monsters was just training to get stronger. But Malice was different. They were enemies that a hero couldn't avoid. From now on, the protagonist would have to wallow through mud, blood, and hatred. Hearing that, Leon suddenly became tense. The next day at the Adventurers Guild, Karen told the MC that the guard squad had contacted her. But she was still worried because he had disappeared for 4 days. He asked if he had made her wait, and she replied that there was something different about him. The protagonist brushed it off, claiming he had just made a breakthrough while hunting monsters. Karen excitedly said she knew it, and that gave her one more reason to congratulate him. Leon looked at her confused and asked, "What?" Then he repeated, "One more reason." Karen smiled and handed him a new badge, and congratulated him on being promoted to C rank Sir MC. He stared at the new badge in his hand and asked if C rank usually meant skipping the sub-rank. Examination. Karen confirmed that was the case. Because of the high ratings from the Ratman and Slime quests, along with recommendation letters from the Lord and the guard captain, he didn't need to take the test. Leon proudly looked at the badge, amazed that he had been promoted after only 2 missions. El Cid said that was impressive, and with this promotion, they would easily get more work while searching for the Malice cult. The protagonist said he would start with C-rank missions, while Karen said he could start immediately. As she handed him a few papers, she secretly thought that looking for another job right after being promoted was on a completely different level. El Cid guessed that was how she understood the situation. And after all, holy power was quite similar to solar energy. Leon asked for El Cid's opinion, and he replied that some missions looked okay, but none of them had anything to do with Malice, so the MC asked if they should focus on training until they found a lead. While Karen kept looking at him, muttering to herself, she offered to show him another catalog, saying that only choosing rejected jobs looked a bit strange. But he interrupted and said it wasn't like that. He thought quietly for a moment, then asked her to show him any mission. When the mention of the slums or unsavory jobs came up, Karen froze, repeating, "The slums." She explained that while slums are usually just poor neighborhoods, things in Blen are different. It's crawling with thieves, informants, escaped criminals, and smugglers. Assassins and all sorts of people who disregard the law, Leon thought. If that's a massive lawless zone within a city as free as this one, then it makes perfect sense. However, Karen noted that there were no adventurer quests involving the slums at all because that kind of work belongs to mercenaries, not adventurers. She said this tensely, and the protagonist let out a quiet curse. Adventurers don't get involved in human-to-human conflicts, yet most of the trouble in the slums is exactly that. He realized that becoming a mercenary right now would cause too much trouble, and if he started asking questions everywhere without a valid reason, people would definitely start watching him. A moment later, Karen handed him a paper and asked what he thought about this quest. Sir Leon. He took it and read through a quest to eliminate magic armors in an abandoned mansion. Decorative suits of armor left inside the empty mansion had suddenly come to life. It had made the place unsellable. Karen said the reward was very low, and not many D-rank adventurers could destroy a pile of armors like that. The protagonist guessed his holy sword could handle them easily. Karen added that the mansion was right next to the slums, so this job would give him an excuse to approach that area. Leon realized that having a legitimate reason was incredibly important, and no matter how powerful the forces in the slums were, They wouldn't want to bring trouble upon themselves with the guild. Adventurers, if they provoke the guild, they might have to face a high-ranking adventurer. After all, A rank and above are under the direct management of the state. Karen gave Leon a gentle smile, and he scratched his head, feeling a bit embarrassed. He thanked her and promised to repay the favor, but Karen said it was fine. She was just doing her duty. Afterward, she reminded him to also collect the reward for the slime quest, which included a generous bonus from the guard captain. The protagonist looked extremely satisfied. As he looked at his bulging coin pouch, then suddenly remembered something and asked Karen if he could ask for one more favor. She replied, "Of course," with a serious expression. Leon asked where the Blen church was located. Karen looked stunned by the question and stammered, asking if he really meant the church. The protagonist confirmed that yes, he had business there. Karen became even more tense, and he thought he had anticipated this reaction. If she truly believed he was a holy knight, as Elsid had said, then even holy knights under punishment aren't allowed to ask the church for help. The only exception is when enemies of the church appear heretics who abandon the goddess. In that case, the church would rally its entire force. That is why the brutal Iron Chain Knights are dispatched. Finally, Karen told him it was in the Northeast District. It's the 13th building at the end of the road. Leon thanked her and said he would depart immediately. Karen stood frozen watching him with her mouth agape before realizing that if a holy knight was heading to this church, then the enemies of the ecclesiastical order must have appeared. She collapsed, falling hard to the floor, thinking that the guild couldn't just turn a blind eye to this. They needed to report this immediately. Elsid looked satisfied and called it a smart move. Leon said it was the best choice if he wanted to hide his true identity. Just a D rank or C rank report wouldn't be enough to spur the guild into action. But then he paused and said that might not be entirely true. Once the report was submitted to the guild would take action themselves anyway, so perhaps he had accidentally exposed himself a little. If the situation became desperate, he could bring Elsid to the church as proof, but he wanted to save that as a last resort. Elsid's seal hadn't been fully undone yet, and the protagonist knew he needed to hone his skills further before he could stand in front of the church and declare that he was the master of the holy sword. Putting that aside, he asked about the living suits of armor. Were they really just hollow shells that knew how to move on their own? Elsid's voice sounded slightly surprised and replied no. This also caught Leon a bit off guard. He explained that living armor is a very rare natural phenomenon. The armor can move through magic dark arts, or power infused into them by someone. They have no will of their own, they are just blocks of metal carrying out orders to attack intruders. The protagonist wondered if a mage could end it all with a magic dispelling spell. Elsid said no. They weren't created with ordinary magic, so dispelling magic wouldn't have any effect. It's like pulling the support beams out from under a house. The rubble would still be lying there. So mages are basically useless in this case. Leon realized that, even so. He guessed the enemies they were about to face weren't too dangerous. Scanning the paper, he noticed the armor was made from a silver-plated iron alloy. He then asked why they hadn't been defeated yet if they were truly that easy to deal with. He added that if this had been assigned as a punishment quest, it would have been cleared out long ago. This made him feel uneasy. Then the protagonist noticed another detail in the report and asked if the armor's regeneration speed was unnaturally fast. The files state that even after being smashed into pieces, the armor reassembles itself in less than 10 minutes. Because of this, everyone's weapons would wear out first. So they had no choice but to retreat. Elsid says, "Now you understand, don't you? That is the formidable durability a living iron alloy suit of armor can possess." Leon rolls up the paper, saying they'll know for sure once they get there. "Let's go." As night fell, they arrived at the slums. Leon stood stunned. The place was far more crowded than he had imagined. He called out to Elsid, who replied that he had felt something. Extremely unpleasant ever since stepping in here. It felt exactly like being followed by someone. Even so, Elsid said that if there were truly a tail, he would have noticed it immediately. He vaguely guessed what this feeling was. Curious, Leon asked what he meant, and Elsid explained it was his Kai sensing ability. His temples react extremely intensely to external influences. People look at the protagonist's age and think he's an easy target, so their malice swirls around his aura. The protagonist shudders and says somehow, it makes him feel even worse. He couldn't believe that stinging sensation was just because someone wanted to harm him. Nevertheless, Elsid warned him to always be on guard. Most hostile thoughts won't amount to anything, but a few could be truly dangerous. Leon says he understands, and Elsid reminds him that no matter where he is, he must always be wary of strangers. and tells him to be careful on this mission. Feeling a bit uneasy, he continues forward. Night had fallen heavily by the time he finally reached the mansion. The protagonist speaks up, "This place has clearly been abandoned for a long time." Elsa jokes that even without the armor, this place wouldn't sell. The protagonist agrees. Nearby, a few suits of armor lie still under thin sheets, and at that very moment, they begin to awaken. The protagonist heads deeper into the mansion. He enters a large room covered in spider webs. He draws his holy sword and declares that he is ready, then steps forward using the sword's magic to light the way. He smirks and says this thing is truly too useful, but Elsa tells him to remember to bring a candle next time. He can't just be glowing like this when there are others around. Leon happily agrees, "Sure thing for next time." Then Elsa points forward. At the end of the hall, a suit of armor wielding a weapon begins to advance toward them. Its eyes flash with strange power. It swings its weapon, cracking the floor. As it points the tip directly at Leon, he says excitedly that this is the first time he's fought someone using a halberd, a weapon that can slash, pierce, and even crush. Most of all, it has a reach of about 2 meters. That means the weapon alone covers the distance that would take the protagonist 2 steps to close in. The armor attacks first. Leon parries and thinks to himself that such reach only works if the wielder has the skill. With a sharp strike, he knocks the weapon aside. No matter how dangerous a halberd is, an empty suit of armor weighing 20 or 30 kilos has no way to use it to overwhelm him. He says that's the price of letting him get too close. His next attack begins to tear the armor apart, but Leon quickly realizes that isn't enough, so he follows up with a flurry of rapid strikes. The armor crumbles. Pieces fly scattered all over the floor. Elsa asks if he used acceleration, then remarks that except for a few minor errors from suddenly speeding up the last strike, wasn't bad. Leon says he can only maintain it for a few seconds. Mount Lafour could use it much more smoothly. Even so, the report says these things can regenerate even when crushed by a warhammer. The protagonist looks at the broken armor on the ground and says it doesn't look like it's regenerating anomalously at all. Elsa guesses that the report might be fake. He admits that's possible, but filing a false report is a second-degree crime in the guild. If anyone died because of it, the guild would even put a bounty on the person responsible. That is what bothers him, who would be so reckless, just to avoid a disciplinary mission. The more he thinks about it, the more he finds this whole thing strange. Regardless of how tough these suits of armor are, Rue should have been able to handle them. Elsid says he doesn't have an answer and wonders if every suit is different. Leon says that's entirely possible and decides he needs to be more careful, but Elsid says that's meaningless now because they have swarmed in. The protagonist looks down the hallway and sees glowing eyes. An entire army of mobile armor starts stomping toward him, squinting at them. Leon says he can't see clearly and asks if Elsid can increase the brightness a bit more. Elsid grumbles that he doesn't know if he's a holy sword or a torch, but he still makes the blade shine brilliantly. Holy light floods the room. The protagonist thinks it's amazing, bright enough to light up the whole space while still being gentle on the eyes. Then suddenly, ear-piercing screams erupt from ahead. The armor starts shrieking and clutching its eyes, completely confused. Leon asks, "What the hell is wrong with them?" Smoke pours from the eyes of the armor, and then they all rush at him at once. He reacts extremely fast and bats away their attacks. He thinks, these things are trying to overwhelm me with numbers. Their attacks are easy to predict, but the movements are strangely perfect. However, something is still wrong. This would only be truly dangerous if they were actual knights. He smirks, wondering how long they think those repetitive attacks. "We'll work on him," Elsid shouted at him, and Leon suddenly realized something was wrong in that brief moment of distraction. It nearly split his head in two, but he managed to duck and dodge it just in time. He jumped back to put some distance between them and irritably asked, "What now?" Elsid told him those weren't living armors at all, and a grumpy Leon shot back, "Then what are they?" Elsid told him to use his special ocular ability. "If you look closely, you'll understand." The protagonist activated his vision and saw something inside the armor. He asked why there was smoke, and Elsid explained that the black mist was a type of malicious force. Even a second of contact with your body would start draining your vitality. Your solar system aura can resist it, but touching that stuff still won't end well for you. Leon asked if that was why they reacted so violently to the light of the holy sword. Elsid replied that was only partially true, because if they were just made of malice, the light would have purified them long ago. Besides, normal living armor doesn't have a mind. They wouldn't be screaming, and there's no reason for them to fear holy light like that. Only certain entities react to purification in this way. And Elsid revealed their true identity. They were evil spirits. He explained that these were ghost armors born when spirits couldn't move on to the afterlife. They possessed armor and let their resentment turn into hatred for the living. Leon remembered the first armor he fought and realized that was why it wouldn't regenerate. Armor manipulated by evil spirits can't truly be destroyed until that resentment is burned away. No matter how much damage he dealt, it would just keep getting back up. The only way to defeat ghost armors is to use powerful magic to drive the spirits out, break their bonds, or purify them with divine power. He was glad to have the holy sword, the most powerful divine weapon, but there was still a problem. There were too many of them. If these were ghost armors, the wisest move was to retreat now, and come back during the day. Elcid said the sheer number of them was the real problem. It was impossible for this many ghost armors to appear by mere coincidence. Leon asked if he meant someone had created them on purpose. Elcid explained that even under ideal conditions, crafting ghost armor almost never succeeds. The mansion shook. That was impossible. How could that many people have perished in this city? Elcid explained that evil. The spirits usually aren't that active. They can't travel far and can't exist in this world for very long. They usually can't even cross into a different district within the same city. Leon immediately spoke up, saying there was only one place left: the slums. It was the only place outside the law where anything could be bought with money or taken by force. The protagonist's resolve hardened. He couldn't ignore this. But with his current strength, he knew he wasn't experienced enough to face it alone. Even using the holy sword to force the church to act would be useless unless he investigated first, to see who this secret group was and what they wanted. So he pushed aside the idea of waiting until morning and decided to head straight forward, thinking that fighting stronger enemies in the darkness would help him grow. Leon continued to slice through the cursed armors. Before long, he had smashed a pile of them without much difficulty. By now, the sky was starting to brighten. Elcid said it looked like they had handled it. Leon agreed. As the sunlight began to spill inside, he admitted that fighting while surrounded wasn't as bad as I thought. Elcid asked if it was because of his blind spot, and the protagonist nodded. His perception ability was nearly flawless, yet his vision still had its limits no matter how sharp it was. I can't see behind my back, and I can't always fight with my back to a wall. Elcid completely agreed, then said, a third-rate warrior is controlled by his circumstances. Second-rate adapts to them, but first-rate turns them into their advantage. Leon took a deep breath, feeling satisfied as he left the mansion. He said this was something he had to overcome. If he wanted to fight for the slums, he had to be ready. The slums were far more dangerous than those traps, and the traps there were laid with true cruelty. He knew that killers and ambushers would aim straight for his blind spot. If he kept relying solely on his vision, he could fall into a trap he couldn't escape. Elsewhere in the city, a child was crying. Something clearly had upset the boy. A cloaked man walked over to him, and as the boy wiped his tears and looked up, he covered his mouth in fear. A large, menacing man had just appeared nearby. Everyone around them froze the moment he appeared. As he walked past with his henchmen in tow, someone whispered that it was Khan, the leader of the strongest gang in the area. A henchman reported that they had been monitoring districts 23 and 25 as ordered, but not a single slave who entered had ever come back out. He added that the area around the mansion seemed too dangerous, so they didn't dare get close, then asked if they should investigate further. Khan said no. Just keep watching from a distance. Getting any closer has already drawn too much attention. Then, sitting regally on a chair that looked like a throne, he called for the next report. Another man said they had checked the water leakage in districts 23 and 25. Mixed in with the filth, they found enough human remains to guess that at least 30 people had been killed that day. When Khan asked what the sorcerer thought, the reply he got back felt strangely off. It was something that even dark magic shouldn't be able to pull off. That finally made Khan look uneasy, so he ordered them to gather everything they'd checked and recorded along with all the evidence for the church and the guild. We have no choice but to act, one of them protested. If this gets handled right now. Not yet. Our cut from the slave traders will get cut in half. Suddenly, red liquid splattered across another guy's face. The one who had just been complaining slumped over dead on the spot. Khan coldly remarked that a person is bound to die the moment they forget where to stop, just like that fool over there. The subordinate was stunned by Khan's skill. He didn't even see the attack. It looked like a simple wave of the hand. Khan warned that those people are entirely different. You cannot control them, and you shouldn't even try. Just getting involved with them is asking for trouble. Whether they are lunatics, fanatics, or spies from another kingdom, there's no reason to get involved. He said if the church takes direct action, they're finished. Anyone who deals even a single coin with that group will be hunted to the ends of the earth. That group is the church's execution force, the Iron Chain Paladins. Khan told them to drop the matter and ordered a report. Next, a guy said he had some news about that abandoned mansion. He heard an adventurer has been visiting it frequently lately for a quest. Khan looked interested, and the guy said, "This has been going on for over a week." He continued saying this, "Adventurer recently got a nickname from jobs involving ratmen and rock slimes. At first it was Cat, but now people call him the Cleaner." A subordinate said, "Maybe it's because he keeps taking the jobs that everyone else rejects." Khan laughed and said that kind of adventurer might actually be useful. Night fell over the bustling city. Back at the inn, Leon didn't rest at all. He poured all his energy into training, and by the time he finished, he looked completely exhausted. Elsid asked how it went. "Could you feel the aura running through your body?" Leon replied yes, adding that the feeling was almost surreal. Elsid praised him, saying a persistent, ordinary person is still better than a lazy genius. The protagonist said that every trial felt like dying and coming back to life, and instead of feeling stronger most of the time, he just felt relieved. Elsid told him to check for himself, then snapped his fingers and reopened the system menu. He was confused as to why his aura usage level had reached low rank when it was only beginner, before even though only his sword proficiency had reached intermediate. Elsid said that is his growth rate, and it makes perfect sense with him as a mentor. The protagonist is learning in a few days what takes others hundreds of days. But he pointed out that the 7-star sword still hasn't appeared. Elsid annoyedly said Leon can't claim to have learned that sword style when he hasn't even mastered the first form. He explained that the 7-star sword, also known as the Chariot, is a secret sword technique created by Rodrigo Roderick Candias Levive. A true master is someone who can link all 7 forms together. He said he wants to learn even just one form before facing the Malice cult and asked if using 2 swords at the same time would give him a big advantage. Elsid replied that if you try to do that before reaching master rank, you're definitely going to die. He cut him off, saying 2 months isn't enough to become strong enough to crush everyone in the slums, so he needs a trump card and an aura-infused weapon. It's meaningless if you can't use it properly. Elsid quietly considered his words. Leon said, "Let's start right now," and he would train until he reached his limits. Elsid said he likes that spirit. But today's lesson is over. The protagonist disappointedly asked why. Elsid said they have uninvited guests and looked out the window. He walked over to look, and Elsid added that they are definitely not guests staying at this inn. Leon asked if they came looking for him. Elsid replied that he didn't sense any monster's malicious intent or anyone particularly high-skilled, but they do look like a bunch of thugs. He wondered if they came from the slums. Elsid said they don't seem very friendly, but he doesn't think they came to fight. The protagonist decided to go meet them and stepped out in front of the inn. A rude guy asked if he was the cleaner. He replied, "That's right." Another guy apologized for appearing unannounced, saying they were just following orders and hoped for his understanding. He asked, "Whose orders?" The guy wrapped in bandages replied they were from a gang called Bastat. Leon looked at the group posing exactly like a silly boy band. He remembered hearing about them while gathering information. At the head of them was Khan. He brushed his hair, one of the figures who dominated the 3 forces carving up these slums. Pointing at the protagonist, a thug said the boss wanted to meet him, though they were told to just let him go if he refused. Even so, he insisted, and advised him to follow them obediently. Without hesitation, he told them to lead the way. The henchmen were quite surprised he agreed so easily, while he secretly thought Khan wouldn't invite him like this if he intended to take his life. And if he could borrow Khan's name, most of the people blocking his way would have to back off. This was a great opportunity to get deeper into the slums. Elsid appeared and teased him that what he was thinking was written all over his face. He smirked in confirmation. The night was clear. As he followed the gang, he calculated that perhaps Khan wanted to give him a job that the Adventurers Guild would never dare to post publicly. If Khan intended to use him, Leon also decided he would play along. When they entered a building, a guy pointed forward and told him to keep going. Suddenly, someone rushed past and slammed into a thug. The man tumbled to the ground and apples scattered everywhere. The person stammered an apology. The thug glared, growling, and started kicking him repeatedly, cursing and shouting about where he was looking. Leon showed clear irritation, but Elsid reminded him to hold back. He indignantly asked what he meant. Elsid warned him he must control his emotions. If he let Khan see the hatred on his face, all his plans would go down the drain, and realizing this, he forced himself to stay calm. A moment later, he said he was fine and promised to be more careful, and that night he arrived at the meeting spot. Dion muttered that this must be the lair of that bastard. Elsid commented coldly that at least they knew how to keep things clean. He scanned the surroundings, wondering if those scratches were remnants of past battles. He said it looked as if they had intentionally left those filthy marks behind. Elsis replied that it was a classic show of power. Suddenly, a giant appeared behind the protagonist and asked if he was the one that people call the cleaner. Leon reacted instinctively and immediately drew his weapon. He spun around to swing his sword, but the giant blocked it using only his wrist. With a sinister smile while holding his blade firmly, the giant mocked him, saying the cleaner was a terrible nickname for him. He was completely shaken by the pressure radiating from this man. The giant then prepared to launch a counterattack. Leon was stunned, eyes wide, feeling like he was going to die as the giant threw a devastating punch, but the fist stopped right in front of him. Even without touching him, the sheer wind pressure from the punch sliced his face. As the dust settled, Leon realized he had no chance of dodging that strike. The shockwave alone was that powerful. If that punch had landed, his head would surely have been crushed. He wondered if this was what being true prey felt like. The man spoke up, praising him for having guts. He hadn't expected anything from a C-rank piece of trash. Then he patted his chest and declared, "Kid, you're the chosen one." He wiped his nose and asked what the hell he was chosen for. Khan said it was for the job he came here to accept. Wasn't that obvious enough since he had followed them all the way here? He added that he would give him what he wanted, and he asked what that was supposed to mean. With a smirk, Khan said he had already investigated him. At the Royal Academy, he was always second among the commoner students, and through sheer relentless effort, he had defeated countless arrogant nobles after leaving school. He joined the Adventurers Guild and quickly caught the eye of big-shot C-rank adventurers. He listened silently, thinking that this guy was truly worthy of being called the top predator of the slums. Khan's eyes and ears must have been everywhere in the alleys. Khan smugly said he somewhat understood why Leon left the academy. From his perspective, he never wanted to be a knight, because he had no intention of kneeling before the nobles. Both Elsid and he were stunned by that deduction. Khan kept rambling on that he had beaten the noble brats black and blue, and became an adventurer instead of being one of those greedy fools who only chased money. He asserted that he saw the bigger picture and chose a path where powerful people could still utilize him. That was the reason, according to Khan, why Leon had climbed to C rank after only 2 missions. He suddenly remembered the battle with the rat folk, then the slimes, and finally the moment he received his badge while Khan pressed him, "Isn't that the truth?" He and LZ just remained silent, stunned as they listened, while he silently thought that Khan was completely delusional. Khan insisted that if he cared about money, he wouldn't have done those things. So from the start, he knew there must be a real goal. He excitedly declared that the goal was fame, the only thing the nobles couldn't manipulate. The thing that would elevate his status regardless of his lowly background. He was certain that was why Leon answered his call without hesitation, even though the slums were full of danger. He still ventured all the way here. "Isn't that proof enough?" Khan questioned. Then he continued saying that if he took this job, that dream would become reality. Looking more serious, he nodded, saying he understood while internally thinking this guy was truly insane. It was all in his head. Elsid cursed, calling it nonsensical garbage, but admitted it did line up with his past and the missions Leon had taken in the eyes of outsiders. It really did look like he was chasing fame. He thought this misunderstanding was different from Rodrigo's, but there was no reason to correct it either. Khan could definitely become an enemy later on. So if he had misunderstood things to this extent, he might as well just go with the flow. He said that at the very least he would hear him out. Khan stared at him with an intensely threatening gaze, and then the negotiation continued. Khan explained that the slum residents were very wary of outsiders, but they didn't completely shun them. This place operated on the law of the jungle, so troublemakers vying for power always appeared. That was why he had turned a blind eye to the new gang's movements for the first 4 months. But everything had changed. When they seized Districts 23 and 25, leaving about 200 corpses in just 1 day. Leon remembered the cursed armor and wondered if the Malus cult was involved with the abandoned mansion and those sets of armor. Khan continued saying the slums were divided among 3 rulers. One was Simon, a loan shark known as the Golden Pig. The second was a mysterious assassin, the Coffin Keeper. someone whose face no one had ever seen. And finally, Khan himself, who sat at the highest position of them all. Leon silently thought that was perhaps because Khan was the first one he met. But those nicknames made the others sound hard to imagine. Khan stated that Districts 23 and 25 were originally Simon's territory, but after losing nearly 200 lives, along with all the uncollectible debts, Simon had lost his mind. So he hired mercenaries ranging from D rank all the way up to B rank, and they were all slaughtered to the last man. That left him shaken. He asked who these people were, and Khan said he was just as clueless. Leon realized they must be incredibly powerful to be able to wipe out that many mercenaries. This was supposed to be a threat the Empire had on its radar for a long time. And if Khan's right, that villa is packed with an insane amount of magic armor. It makes total sense. Khan says everyone who tried to snoop around ended up dead, except for that guy who keeps bad-mouthing Simon for being too cowardly to make a move. He says the Gravekeeper is likely just sitting on the sidelines watching his subordinates try to avoid sparking an all-out war. He added that they'd complain if he didn't step in himself, and he knows why. But bottom line, the whole situation is a stalemate where neither side interferes, and Khan confirmed that's exactly what's annoying him. That's why he summoned you, an adventurer hungry for fame, and after testing you, Khan is even more sure about it. You dove head first into danger instead of running, so he's guessing you won't say no. You say it sounds like Khan wants you to play the mercenary assassin, betray the Adventurers Guild, and be his obedient puppet. Khan looks smug, praising your sharp instincts. He says it would be great to have someone like you instead of a bunch of idiots. But Leon bluntly fires back that he hates gangs and mobsters and figures Khan just wants to borrow outside power so he doesn't lose his grip to these dangerous enemies. The protagonist also realizes the malice cult is the bigger problem here. But Khan himself could become an even worse nightmare down the line, so the protagonist agrees, but asks how Khan plans to get the Mercenary Guild to act. Khan replies by showing him some documents. You start reading and immediately freeze. The further you go, the worse it gets. The files are full of evidence that people from the slums are being taken to be sacrificed to the malice cult. Even Elsid is shocked, saying the death toll could be in the hundreds or worst case thousands. A wave of nausea hits Leon in a place with no walls and no oversight like this. No one really knows what's going on. Elsid notices your reaction and speaks up, rejecting the leaders of the Mercenary Guild, who are even more stubborn. The protagonist thought they'd never believe proof from someone as shady as him, but Leon says that's why Khan needs you. Khan agrees, saying you'll become the evidence, that the guild can't ignore living proof. The protagonist says that's shamelessly unbelievable because whether you survive to bring the report back or die and become the evidence, Khan still comes out on top. Khan bursts out laughing and asks, "So are you in?" The protagonist calls him a shameless bastard, pointing out yet again that whether he lives or dies, he's just a tool for him. Khan presses him for an answer, and with a slam of his hand on the table, he agrees. Khan says intelligence is hard to gather in the slums and hands him the job. It could still save hundreds of lives. Then he tosses 2 items on the table and tells Leon to take them. When the protagonist asks what they are, Khan says one is a dagger bearing his insignia. Just show it to anyone who wants to pick a fight, and nobody will dare touch you except for the Gravekeeper. The protagonist says that gives him the creeps and hands it back, prompting Khan to curse. Then Khan explains that the pouch contains magic scrolls for emergencies or to sell if Leon wants. He tells him to just think of it as an advance payment. You were about to ask something else, when a memory flashes through your head, that punch earlier that Khan pulled at the last second. The protagonist asks if he was intentionally holding back from the start. Khan thinks in silence for a moment, then smiles and confirms it. That night, back at the inn, Leon sits in his room lost in thought. Khan is the reason he's still shaken up. The protagonist can't stop thinking about Khan's ridiculous wolf fang strength, which makes one thing clear: he still needs to train a lot more. Leon asks Elsid if there's anything notable in the documents. And Elsid says yes, but he needs to study them more. If they have to go up against malice, one wrong move could lead to disaster. You ask if that means Elsid needs to go see for himself, and the sword agrees. Then you think about the upcoming mission. Sneaking into a place that wiped out 500 mercenaries won't be easy. You tell Elsid you need help. Someone who can't be bribed and will protect you without hesitation. Worried, Elsid asks if that's asking for too much. The protagonist ignores that and adds one more condition: that person must truly hate malice. Elsid says there's only one place to find someone like that, and the protagonist asks if he means building number 30 in the Prima district. The next day, the protagonist and Elsid stand in front of a building. You ask if this is a sanctuary. You wonder why a branch was set up in such a poor place. And Elcid explains that the church always sends priests to where the forgotten people are. He explains that the greedy can be tempted and those hungry for ambition can be manipulated. But priests are different. They follow their faith and the goddess's commandments so they won't lose their way. In short, they won't be swayed by his lies. Leon realizes he has no other choice, even if he doesn't want to draw attention to himself as a fledgling hero. He'll still have to tell the truth. The protagonist thinks if he reveals his identity, a priest will keep it a secret if he asks. He also notices the people here. Even though they're dressed in rags, they look full of hope and don't even steal from each other. That makes him think this church branch must have earned their trust. You start to get curious about which bishop is in charge of this place. When you get to the door, you knock lightly. A voice calls out asking who it is, and the protagonist replies that he's an adventurer with important information for the bishop. Immediately, a strange feeling runs through your body and your aura starts to shift. It's reacting to the aura of whoever is behind the door. The person who opens it has pointed ears. He introduces himself as the bishop of this branch. Now both Leon and Elcid are stunned the bishop is an elf. His hands are bruised, and he's calmly drinking something warm. Tiger smiles, saying you must be surprised to see an elf serving as a bishop and not getting an immediate answer. Tisser admitted it was a bit unconventional, but he insisted the goddess loves all races equally, and he serves her with his whole heart. And then Leon received another surprise Tisser already knew about him from the things he had done in the past. Thanks to the protagonist's efforts, the water source had become cleaner, and the number of people suffering from stomach issues had dropped significantly. Tisser said the goddess must be very pleased, leaving the protagonist a bit flustered. Saying he was honored, the bishop's tone turned serious as he brought up the matter the protagonist mentioned wanting to share. Leon took a deep breath to steel himself. Before saying anything else, he asked Tisser to read the documents. The bishop took them and examined them carefully, his gentle expression fading away. In its place was anger. Tisser said the matter was serious enough to require the church's direct intervention, which gave Leon hope, but the bishop warned that the source of the information seemed suspicious, so the central church would likely send someone they trusted to verify it, which would take far too much time, a point the protagonist agreed with. To go with him to investigate District 23 and District 25 number. Tisser apologized and said no one at this branch knew how to fight. A few of them knew healing arts and support, but he feared they wouldn't be of much help. On a mission like this, Leon felt his last option slipping away when suddenly Tisser's fighting spirit surged and he declared that if that were the case, he would go himself. The protagonist and Elcid were both stunned by that answer. Tisser insisted that this matter could not be entrusted to anyone else. Even though he was a bishop, it didn't mean he was afraid to get his hands dirty. Leon had been expecting a recommendation rather than the bishop taking action himself, so he asked if that was really okay. The elf looked a bit offended and asked if he really seemed that unreliable. Seeing the scars all over his body, the protagonist began to reconsider. Then Tisser extended an arm, and a glowing red aura gathered in his hand. It was aura. Fire compressed so tightly it overflowed and burned the air around it. This technique was strong enough to rip through Midran armor like paper. Elcid said that level of control proved Tisser had mastered it through countless battles and could be on par with Khan. Leon realized there was a reason he was a bishop. Tisser asked what he thought and said he wouldn't get in his way. The protagonist sheepishly admitted that if anyone was going to slow the other down, it would probably be himself. Tisser smiled and told him not to flatter him so much. He explained that 55 years ago he served in the Iron Chain Holy Knight Order, but now he was just an old veteran. He immediately recognized the name and wondered if Tisser had belonged to the continent's strongest force. Extremely excited. Leon said he would be relying on Tisser's guidance, but the elf replied that he was the one who should be saying that. Tisser asked for a few minutes to get his weapon and told the protagonist to wait in the front courtyard. The protagonist almost couldn't believe his eyes. He was teaming up with a member of the Iron Chain Holy Knight Order. He even started imagining a knight's weapon. Classic, elegant, perhaps a bow suitable for an elf? Elcid called him an idiot and asked if he hadn't noticed the calluses on Tisser's hands. Why was he just staring with such a confused look? Then suddenly a spiked iron ball smashed into the ground. Tisser appeared with a smile on his face holding a chain whip. Both Leon and Elcid were startled. After a moment of silence in the yard, Tisser decided to show off its power. He swung the chain whip hard and let it fly. The strike slammed directly into the nearby rocks. crushing them to pieces. Still smiling, he said it felt great that it had been a long time since he felt like this. He added that he would never forget the feeling of crushing the skulls of heretics with this weapon. That sent an extra chill down Leon and Elsid's spines. Tisser continued saying that this battle would destroy evil and perhaps help atone for his own sins as well. He was certain the goddess would watch over their holy war, and asked what the protagonist thought. The protagonist awkwardly muttered that she was surely watching, and Tisser replied with absolute confidence that she was. That afternoon, they snaked through the alleys of the slums. He asked Elsid if the bishop was still following them, and Elsid said yes. Leon said they had told Tisser to change his clothes because a priest couldn't just walk into a criminal den looking like that. However, something was wrong. The protagonist could sense him through his spirit aura, but his normal senses completely lost track of him. Elsid explained it was a technique using spirit aura to erase one's presence. It is very difficult to maintain while moving, but Tisser was extremely skillful. A drunkard suddenly stumbled into the spot where the elf should have been standing. He started shouting. Then another guy looked over and wondered who he was talking to since there was no one there. Elsid said Tisser must have a lot of experience in infiltrating. The protagonist agreed. He was basically invisible even if the protagonist could still sense him through his spirit aura. Elsid explained that normally he wouldn't be able to detect him, but the laws of spirit aura can change depending on each person's attribute. From Tisser's reaction, Elsid guessed the elf had a moon attribute. The protagonist's attribute was the sun, which explained why he could still sense him. The sun makes these kinds of stealth techniques less effective against him. Leon wondered if the sun and moon were just a coincidence or if there was a deeper meaning. A moment later, he spoke up and said they had arrived at District 23. C commented that the gang's dagger had truly been a big help, and the protagonist nodded in agreement, recalling how the thugs along the way had stared them down. The moment he drew the dagger, every member of the gang fell silent and stepped back to clear a path. Lisa remarked that she couldn't believe they had made it through the slums so easily. She praised Leon, saying he was indeed as exceptional as the rumors suggested, and he replied that thanks to the protagonist, he could now punish those shameless heretics who dared to trample on lives without being grateful for the goddess's grace. Such words made him and Elsid feel a slight chill. As they moved forward, the protagonist said that from here on out, they were in the territory of the Maris cult, and since the surface was too dangerous, they would use the sewer route Khan had shown him. They descended while Tisser used magic to light the way, but then he extinguished the light and signaled for Leon to stay quiet as from a nearby passage. They heard someone saying they had to stop for today because the sacrifices were starting to fight back. The man complained that 70 people a day was too many, even when they were constantly dumping bodies. They could only finish when the ritual ended at night. Then they grumbled and cursed those bastards who always left the cleaning up to them. Leon was absolutely horrified. A ritual of 70 people a day. They had been killing that many every single day for a whole month. As his rage flared, he saw Tisser draw his weapon and say he would take the lead. The bishop leaped up, shattering the floor, and landed right behind that group of people. In the blink of an eye, his chain flail smashed straight into a guy's face. With sharp and practiced movements, he took out 2 of them almost instantly. Leon followed behind a bit bewildered, and Tisser coolly remarked that they were supposed to be infiltrating. Another man appeared in front wearing a fierce mask and surrounded by thick smoke. The bishop lunged at him before he could act, but something caught the bishop by surprise. His weapon halted, blocked by a magical barrier. The masked man laughed loudly and said that all attacks were useless against his outer armor. Then he angrily shouted, asking how they dared to sneak in here. He then smirked and said their timing was perfect, because they were short on sacrifices. A second later, he was sliced in half. Leon had finished him with one sharp strike. Staring at the protagonist, another guy began to panic. He asked who he was and if he knew who he was messing with. Then Tisser appeared right behind him and grabbed his head tight. Together, the two quickly wiped out the remaining fanatics. Then they looked down at the bodies scattered on the ground. Looking satisfied, Tisser said, "My brother, I've taken care of them." He awkwardly told him not to say such things so loudly. The protagonist noticed these fanatics were carrying high-quality swords, and Tisser said he had picked one up. Perhaps that was why the protagonist could pierce through their heretical defenses. The protagonist checked back with Elsid to see if everything was okay. Elsid replied that it was fine, everything was still going according to plan. He had also cast a special spell on himself, so, in the eyes of others, he just looked like an ordinary sword. Exactly like the swords they had collected. He thought that was good because otherwise the holy sword would be too conspicuous. Even so, someone overly familiar with the church or with Rodrigo might still recognize it as the Holy Sword. Leon knew this could hardly be called a smooth infiltration, but they had now exposed the true nature of the enemy and even heard the evidence with their own ears. The sword was unfazed, but said it was only called an infiltration if they actually finished it successfully. Otherwise, if no one was left alive to open their mouth, it was basically an assassination. Just kill them all. Then you can call it an infiltration if you want. Elcid and the protagonist smiled at that, but they couldn't help feeling uneasy. The protagonist said they should keep searching, and the sword agreed with its brother, the protagonist. Then they teamed up to push open a heavy metal door. Inside was a horrific scene, corpses, torture devices, and piles of human bones. He covered his mouth with his hand to him. This sight was like a nightmare. He could only wonder how many lives had been lost here, and how much unimaginable pain they must have endured. Elcid told him he had to try to endure it. He said Leon might never have seen anything this terrible before, but he must not look away. A hero must remember this. The sword said this tragedy was the true form of the enemy, the one he had chosen to confront. Leon asked, "Isn't our enemy the Demon King?" And Elcid replied that a common Demon King was not enough to define that. This world was not so simple that defeating one villain could save it. That left Leon shaken. Elcid said poverty was the disease of the poor, while the Demon King was the disease of the weak, and then he asked if there was any simple truth behind disasters like this. No. Could a holy sword slice through poverty? Could it wipe away disease compared to those things? The Demon King is nothing more than something he can cut down. A true hero is someone who builds a brighter tomorrow, so you must press on to the very end no matter how ugly the truth gets. You cannot look away. Only by facing tragedy head-on can you tear evil out by its roots. Leon finally managed to steady his breathing. Looking ahead, he wondered what on earth he had been thinking before. Anyone who could recover this quickly, after witnessing all of this. They must have an incredibly ironclad will, Leon thought to himself. Leon called over the bishop and the elf, saying this was likely the main base and everything before this was just a place to dump the bodies. From here on out, they'll likely face at least 10 enemies, so rushing in blindly would be dangerous. He recalled Khan saying to treat this as an advance payment, and to use it however he needed. Leon didn't want to rely on it, but now he had no choice. He pulled a scroll from his bag and opened it. Sarah asked, "Brother Leon, what kind of scroll is that?" He focused as he held it, then activated a clairvoyance spell. Elsis explained that this magic allows the caster to see beyond normal limits, and he even helped sharpen Leon's vision. Instantly, Leon began to see right through the walls and floors of the entire place. Then the scroll fell, and he suddenly looked pained. He clutched his face as the elf rushed over, but Leon said he was fine. "It's nothing," he said. This base didn't seem very large, housing about 24 people in total, and he pointed out the rough locations of all of them. But in the center, there was one room. He still couldn't see through it, even though he knew the entrance was to the east. Leon said that room might be the key. The elf said, "Maybe, or maybe it's a trap. A common trick is to lure intruders exactly where you want them. Sometimes the place that looks weakest is the most heavily guarded." He said it could just be an empty room, just for dumping trash while the real operation is in Sector 2. That made Leon tense. He told him he might be right, but he didn't want to act unless they were sure. Security wouldn't get any looser if they came back later, so today was still their best shot. Now that they had found the potential target, Sarah asked if they should take them all out, as quickly and quietly as possible. Nearby, two guys were talking when chains suddenly wrapped around them, and the cultists were finished off in a blink. Further down the hallway, another guy was snatched up by the elf's chains. He said, "That's 12 down." Exited, the elf said his body was finally warming up. He joked that he was too old to fight recklessly like he used to. Sarah asked, "Is this the wall that you can't see through?" Leon nodded. Now he just needed a way to open it. He slammed his shoulder into it, but there was no handle and it didn't budge no matter if he pushed or pulled. Strange characters covered the surface. They glowed bright red like an open wound. Wielding his weapon, the elf told Brother Leon to back off for a second, then he struck the wall, but nothing happened. Leon was stunned. The attack had actually bounced off. Even the elf looked surprised. He remembered him smashing stone at the church. That weapon could crush rock into dust. He also remembered how easily they had taken down the cultists. So why couldn't an attack like that leave even a scratch on this wall? Elsa said it was made of something abnormal, a door created from materials of a different dimension, based on laws that don't exist in this world. As far as he could remember, it froze when exposed to heat and ignited when exposed to cold. Furthermore, it rejected all outside interference. Leon realized that. That explained why the scroll couldn't see through it either. If both brute force and magic failed, then there was only one way left. Suddenly, the elf began to pray. He begged his god to bestow purifying light upon his hands. Leon asked if this was holy magic, and Elsis confirmed it. Yes, that is a power that cannot be trained like aura or learned like magic. It stems from faith, virtue, and the natural laws of this world. The sword explained that heretic magic cannot overcome holy magic. When the elf finished praying and pressed his hands to the wall, cracks began to spread across its surface. Leon shouted that the door was finally about to break, but then it suddenly stopped. The bishop pushed harder, his hands glowing brightly as he poured more strength into it. Leon asked, "Isn't holy magic stronger than heretic magic?" And Elsid said that was true. If this door could resist the holy magic of a bishop, it was tougher than expected. That meant it must be guarding something important, not just a trap. He said Leon would need to finish it off and he would support him. Leon nodded in agreement. As Leon gathered his aura, Sarah looked on confused and called out, "Brother Leon!" Then Leon screamed and lunged at the door, unleashing a terrifying slash. An energy blade tore right through it and the door shattered into pieces. Startled, he asked if it had just disappeared. Elzid said that just proved it didn't belong to this world to begin with. Sarah praised the attack and admitted he had underestimated his little brother. Embarrassed, Leon said he was too kind. He did most of the work anyway. The bishop said he couldn't sense anything behind the door, as if it were completely empty unless they were using this place for a ritual. Leon vaguely saw inside, but the smell of blood hit them with such intensity. Then the elf used magic, and what appeared shocked him just as much as it shocked Leon. In the darkness, they found some kind of living mass of flesh. He stuttered, asking what that thing was, then lost his cool and shouted, asking what the hell that thing was. Even the elf struggled to keep his composure. Inside was an amorphous, tangled lump of meat. Eyes and mouths, parts of it crawled across the floor. Making a sickening sound, Leon said with tears in his eyes, "They're all still alive." Elsid said he understood now. They harvest flesh and drain blood from high-level beings, turning them into living chunks of meat brimming with vitality. And look at the quantity here. The goal is crystal clear. A heretical ritual to summon a monster by using countless lives as sacrificial bait because it can swallow an entire city whole with just one bite. This catastrophe is known as the city swallower. Leon asked, "The what?" Then Elsid explained that the preparation takes a great deal of time and effort, but once it begins, it cannot be stopped. It is an extra-dimensional entity that even a transcendent being would not want to face. It appears, swallows a city in one bite, and returns to its own dimension. The protagonist thought about the free city of Blen. If this ritual succeeds, it would be a catastrophe. Horrified, Leon asked if this had ever happened before, and the sword replied that if it hadn't happened, there wouldn't be any records left. He explained that with black magic, no one knows what will happen until it is activated, so the church can only come up with countermeasures afterward. Utterly terrified, he asked what the countermeasure for the city swallower is. They can't fight something like that without a plan. Right. Elsid was silent, clearly deep in thought, while the protagonist addressed him. The sword said this facility was just a processing site for sacrifices, but even so, that wasn't enough. The security here was also too lax. Leon asked if they had gathered enough yet. The sword replied, yes, at least 90%. Now all that's left is to start the ritual. He explained they would start as soon as the residents were evacuated, leaving the protagonist in total shock. Elsid said they needed a direct approach. He asked back, a direct approach. The sword said they needed to rally all the city's forces and use brute force to take Sector 25. A ritual this large requires massive preparation, so if they crush the enemy first, it would all end right there. Leon said that would mean total war, and his companion confirmed that once backed into a corner, the cultists would cling to their last resort. He explained that the scary part about dark magic is its incredible defensive capability. They are linked to another dimension, blocking any power that isn't divine. And he added that the protagonist has one more thing, the omnipotent holy sword. Elsid said they would wear the cult down with total war and then finish them off quickly. If they still don't know about the holy sword, they will be trapped with no way out. Leon said, that sounds better. But if they aren't stupid, they'll realize they've been exposed and set an ambush. Burning with resolve, he said they would just have to take that risk. The elf looked at him and called him brother. The protagonist warned that they needed to leave right now. The enemy had likely realized an intruder was inside. Leon bent down to pick up a piece of that creature and replied. Then he wondered what it meant to still be alive in such a state. As he tucked it into his pocket, the elf readied his weapon, letting the chain of his weapon extend and lunging straight at the giant creature. He repeatedly struck the monster hard, tearing it apart while keeping his cool amidst the chaos. Afterward, both ran toward the exit. Steiger told the protagonist to move fast, and the protagonist agreed. A few cultists discovered them escaping while another panicked, because the sacrifices they had spent so much effort preparing. It had been ruined. Someone ordered to stop the pursuit and lock down the entire place. Since it had been discovered, a knight soon greeted them outside. Exhausted, Leon said it seemed the cultists had stopped chasing them, and Steiger said their presence was fading. The elf said this reminded him of poking a beehive as a kid when he escaped by jumping into a pond. This time it was much worse and there was no pond waiting for them, especially since the things here were nothing like bees. He guessed any reinforcements from the church would take time to arrive, then asked what the protagonist thought. The protagonist sank into deep thought. El Cid's plan would need someone with enough authority to mobilize everyone. He had considered revealing the holy sword if the situation became desperate. But even though he trusted him deeply, he still wanted to keep it hidden from others. Leon thought perhaps he had realized something when they fought together, but since he had asked for his opinion, he decided to speak up and said he had come up with a brilliant plan. A moment later at the church, the two sat around a tea table discussing the crisis. Steiger thought about it very carefully. He said there were some uncertain parts, but it was worth a try, especially since they didn't have any better options. Leon asked if he really thought so, and Steiger said yes. The protagonist thanked God in his head. It was hard enough explaining everything and getting people to believe it, so he knew he would have laughed too if he had suddenly heard this plan. Since news of the city swallower might be a secret even within the church, they would call it an inference. As for breaking the barrier if he couldn't mention the holy sword, the only remaining reason was to say that solar aura is especially effective against dark magic. Hearing this, Steiger said that solar aura has always been considered a top-tier trait when recruiting. For the church, it's so rare that Leon is the first person he's ever seen possess it, and now he thinks he finally understands why. The main character says that once the decision is made, they will mobilize the Adventurers Guild and the army to lead them to the enemy base, allowing a small elite team to infiltrate inside. Elf says that means they need two things. The guild and the army are to be mobilized along with a team ready to infiltrate the base. You say the first part will be easy if he speaks up. Steiger says the real issue is finding people. Who can resist dark magic, and the team must have at least A-rank members from the guild. Leon starts thinking about A-rank warriors, and then a very exciting idea pops into his head. You ask what he thinks about recruiting strong people from the slums. The man repeats, from the slums. The main character says there is actually two people with strength around A-rank. You ask if the prey and the coffin keeper would be okay. Steiger asks if they would agree. Setting aside skill levels, the MC says they won't have much of a choice if Elf personally talks to them. Then Steiger seems to realize something, his eyes lighting up. He asks if this counts as recruiting. Leon says they will offer those guys a chance to perform a great service for the church, and once he raises the iron chain seal, they will surely have to concede. El Cid says you might get stabbed if those guys heard you say that. You remember Khan's brutal punch and say you absolutely won't do it. Because Khan made your nose bleed right the next day at the Adventurers Guild, everyone is trembling over something. Rice nervously greets Leon, and it seems she is preparing to welcome someone even more important. Behind the main character, an armored figure steps forward. The armored man stares intensely at the receptionist. Guild members panic, wondering if he is the Iron Chain Paladin and why someone like that would come here. Leon says he didn't come for a rescue request this time, but for official business. Taking off his helmet, Elf introduces himself as a bishop of the Holy Church and says he came here to request the guild's support in the sacred name of the Iron Chain Paladin. Then a loud voice suddenly rings out from outside the guild. Moments later, in a quieter room, a man introduces himself as Bernard, the Blen branch manager, and says they will leave this matter in his hands even though they haven't worked together before. The MC notices that Bernard is even bigger than Khan. You once heard that this man was an A rank before retiring due to a leg injury. Bernard says he understands the gravity of this situation. Serious enough for a paladin to personally call for a meeting. Leon mutters to himself that this is exactly the kind of judgment you'd expect from a guildmaster. The conversation moves quickly, but once they explain how little time is left, things get tougher. Conrad says Blen currently has 4 high-level adventurers, but only 1 can be mobilized right now. Not counting those already on missions, they hand that adventurer over to the guild master, while the bishop and you head to the slums to recruit Khan the prey. That encounter turns out to be more threatening than expected, perhaps because Khan is suspected of helping the Malise Guild, but in the end he has no choice but to accept. Sizer tells him that if he refuses, everyone in his group will be branded as heretics, and he can try running to the ends of the continent. Leon thinks that threat was exactly what broke his will. Khan realizes he walked right into a trap. He had hoped to wipe out the cultists and make the Adventurers Guild suffer casualties. Sizer adds that this order isn't just for Khan, but also for the Coffin Keeper, and if Khan doesn't want to suffer alone, he'd better send a message to that guy. Confused Khan asks if it's really just him and the Coffin Keeper. The leader replies, "That's right. The 2 of them are enough to be the core force. Others just need to evacuate the civilians and keep them away from the battlefield." Khan asks if they intend to use a small elite group to cut off the snake's head, and Sizer compliments him on being quite sharp for a thug. Leon thinks regardless they can't leave Khan out of this. To stop the City Eater, everyone must work together. That's still better than everyone dying. Looking back, the main character can't believe that so many people have gathered in just 2 days. From above, you look at the crowd next to Sizer. Rice says an urgent request was sent to every member of the guild from rank C and up, and most of them chose to join. Bernard says there are about 1,500 people in total, and now it really feels like total war. Leon thinks he only persuaded the Lord of Blen because of the evidence he held back. The garrison team has surrounded District 25. The adventurers and mercenaries will handle close combat while other forces support from behind with long-range attacks. Elzid says that is a wise choice. If they blindly charged in, they would just become fuel for the dark magic. So it's better to pressure the enemy from afar instead of empowering them. The MC looks at him clearly satisfied. After all, they were forced to do it anyway. Still, the Lord of Blen really did send someone to help them. The man introduces himself as Conrad, a high-ranking knight of the Count Blen family, and sends his greetings to the goddess's guardian. Sizer humbly says he is unworthy of that title, and prays the goddess will protect the knight. Leon knows Conrad is famous for his resounding victories. Khan mutters that he really doesn't belong here, and emphasizes that he is the leader of the slums after all. Then someone quietly sneaks up behind the main character and asks if they are late. Conrad asks who that is, and the stranger grumpily retorts asking why Conrad is questioning him when he was the one who called him here. Khan says both of them were dragged into this, so let's just focus on the mission, simultaneously calling him the Coffin Keeper, but the man says he will act on his own. He is an assassin, so coordinating smoothly with a group isn't really his style. Caesar says he doesn't care how he does it, just as long as the mission gets done. If that guy thinks he can just turn invisible and tail them, he's going to realize pretty soon that there's nowhere to hide. You can't hide from the goddess's light. The assassin stared at him, saying it in a cold, dry tone. It was truly terrifying. And then he started fading into thin air. The MC couldn't believe it. You absolutely couldn't sense this guy at all. Not by feeling his battle aura, and not even by just looking at him with your own eyes. Elzid mentioned that meant there was only one person left, and the MC explained it was an adventurer hired by the guild. Right then, a tall woman appeared with a cheerful greeting, saying she arrived a bit late because the request hadn't been clearly explained, so she had to prepare a lot of things beforehand. She then introduced herself as Karen. The other 3 seemed strangely tense when they were near her, and he wondered why she was the complete opposite of that last guy. A thug, 2 more adventurers, a former holy knight of the Iron Chain, a high-ranking knight from the Count's territory, and an assassin. Leon scanned this bizarre lineup. The main character knew all too well that a team like this would never be able to coordinate properly. They were chosen for their individual skills, not for their ability to work as a team. Now it was time. He gave the order to begin, and a massive sudden explosion of fire erupted in one corner of the area. At the same time, catapults launched fireballs inside. Before long, the whole area was engulfed in a sea of flames. Several fanatics panicked, screaming that they were under attack, and they told the others to contact headquarters, but one of them realized something strange. Looking up, he saw glowing objects raining down, and a second later, arrows were flying straight at them. Terrified, one guy screamed. He told them to release the hideous monster immediately. As the fire continued to spread, the area was left in ruins, and then a giant monster burst out. It crushed everything in its path. There was the sound of bowstrings snapping, and the archers immediately targeted the strange beast. The very next moment it lifted an arm and slammed it down, smashing the wall where the archers were standing. One of the wounded groaned that their arrows weren't doing anything at all. Then the mercenaries rushed in, mocking them for being useless and ordering everyone to move in and kill it. The elite group saw the battle slowly grinding to a stalemate. LZ said they handled the opening well, but that monster wouldn't be taken down easily. He estimated the battle would last at least 10 minutes, and said that if the plan succeeded, the enemy would realize they couldn't win in a direct confrontation and would have to retreat into their shell. Rodrigo agreed. Right then, a tornado suddenly formed in the middle of the city, and Rodrigo repeated that this was exactly what they had predicted. Elzid said that no matter how you looked at it, that storm wasn't a natural phenomenon. Leon asked if it was some kind of dark magic. Sizer cut in, saying it was their turn now, and he started to bolt. The MC tried to keep up, but the others were much faster than he had expected. Before long, they reached the tornado. Leon arrived a little later, panting for breath, and Rodrigo gave a forced smile, apologizing as they really hadn't thought about the fact that he needed to keep up with their pace. Then his expression turned serious. As he said, he was going to test just how tough this dark magic barrier really was. He activated his flame battle aura, and fire began to wrap around the tornado. The main character couldn't help but admire that power, just as he expected from Sir Conrad. A moment later, Rodrigo confirmed the barrier was extremely solid. Khan mocked the weaklings and told them to step aside. Just let that knight die if that's how it's going to be. Then he charged into the barrier, swung his arm back, and delivered a brutal punch to it. Even so, when the others looked back, almost nothing had changed. That gave Conrad a chance to attack again, and he laughed impressively. Sizer said his holy magic could probably break the barrier too, but he should save his energy because they still didn't know what was inside. Rotating his shoulder, Leon said he had just revealed a rather embarrassing side of himself, which made the others start to pay more attention to him. Afterward, he asked LZ if he had stored up enough power. The sword replied that it was more than enough. The power was overflowing thanks to all those fanatics Leon had taken down earlier. Elzid said that just one heretic provided more power than thousands of monsters. So if the MC didn't need to hold back, he should go all out. He agreed, but warned Elzid not to get too carried away, to the point of breaking the transformation form. After focusing his power, the main character prepared to land the blow to break the barrier. Karen seemed to realize something, while Conrad watched with great interest. Then the MC yelled and attacked. The strike instantly shattered both the barrier and the tornado. The others stared in shock. The dark magic barrier was gone, which meant this was their chance. The whole group went down through the newly opened passage. They entered the damp hallway below. Sizer lit up the dark corridor as they moved. Karen asked if the coffin guardian was going with them, and he suddenly appeared right beside him with a calm reply that made him freeze. The main character thought all 6 of them had gotten inside safely, but what really surprised him was that the other 2 wore chainmail without making a single sound. LZ said that proved their basic skills were on a completely different level, and the MC realized he still had a long way to go. Karen immediately pointed to an entrance ahead, leading deeper into the underground. Elzid found that very suspicious, and Conrad agreed that it might be a trap. Still, Rodrigo says they can't just ignore this. Karen argues it's likely the only way down, so they don't have a choice but to follow it. Even though it feels a bit too easy, Tisser asks if she's detected any traps nearby. Leon recalls the guildmaster calling her a thief, but Karen insists the area past the stairs feels like an entirely different dimension, so she can't be sure until they enter. Tisser decides they have to go in anyway. Waiting around will only make things worse. Tisser agrees, and the group starts down the stairs. As they descend, Leon realizes he still can't sense the coffin keeper and has no idea if they're being followed. Then he steps on a tile and accidentally triggers a magic trap. The floor beneath him vanishes and he screams in terror, bracing himself for the impact. But the impact never comes. When he opens his eyes, he's standing on solid ground somewhere else. He's no longer on the stairs and has no idea where he is. Looking around, he realizes everyone else has vanished, and he can't sense anyone's aura. Elsis explains that this is a maze formation, a classic trick that bends and stretches space to make the base seem much larger than it actually is. The others have likely been scattered to different areas, and with any luck, Leon will find them soon. Just then, Karen appears and calls him a junior. She says they found each other the moment they were separated, and Elsis takes note of that. Karen says she feels relieved and teases him, asking if he's scared of being stuck in a dark place like this. The protagonist barely hears a word she says. He's too hung up on her calling him junior, so Leon calls her senior back and asks if she also ended up falling here alone. She looks behind her and answers no. There's some freak sticking to her. The protagonist immediately asks, "A freak?" And a voice from the shadows calls out asking who she's calling a freak. Karen irritably retorts that he's obviously the only freak around here, and if he doesn't like it, he should just crawl out of her shadow. Instead of slithering around like a creep, he replies that he'll go wherever he wants. He feels lucky to be reunited with a thief, and honestly, he's not too worried about the others. He urges them to keep moving while Karen says she actually likes that confidence. She asks if they can count on this junior. Leon confidently says he won't let her down. As they move through the hallways, Karen stays on high alert, and soon the three of them reach the end of a corridor lined with doors. Karen immediately points to one of them and says the way forward is there. This makes the protagonist a bit tense. He notices she's moving with agility that goes beyond mere instinct, and starts to wonder if it's really safe to trust her this much. Elsis tells him she hasn't been wrong once, so they should just follow her. Elsis figures her tracking ability is even more advanced than a wood elf's. Leon asks if she's really that good, and Elsis says perhaps the aura and the shadows around them are assisting her. Suddenly, Karen raises her hand to signal them to stop telling the protagonist to hold on. She can sense enemies ahead. After checking the area, she says there are 3 of them blocking the path with no way around, then smiles and asks him how he wants to handle it. From their auras, Leon can tell these guys are much stronger than the ones in the 23rd district. Even with the Holy Sword's power, victory isn't guaranteed. Still, he declares he'll take them out. Karen teases him for acting so tough when he's only rank C, asking if he realizes how embarrassing it would be if he had to ask for help after talking such a big game. He snaps back that she'd better be careful too. Karen smirks, draws her weapons, and declares they'll race to see who finishes first, and he notices her purple aura. A moment later, she rockets upward and latches onto the ceiling. Leon asks if that's an aura skill too. Elsis replies, yes, adding that she's incredibly skilled and must have trained hard. Elsis warns the protagonist that if he wants to keep up with someone this agile, he's going to need much better footwork. The protagonist says he knows. The 3 fanatics continue their work until one of them notices something overhead. It's Karen casually waving at them. They immediately scream that there's an intruder. All 3 freeze in confusion for a split second, but that's more than enough. 2 of them are pinned by Karen's throwing daggers before they can even react. Leon is stunned by her speed. One claws at the ground and roars, "How dare you attack us!" Then they reveal their true forms in human creatures, and one asks if she even knows where she is. Karen doesn't even blink. She says this is nothing more than an ownerless junkyard and charges straight at them, launching more weapons. A creature mocks her, saying that those toys are useless, but it doesn't notice something slithering around its feet. A rope suddenly tightens and yanks the monster to the ground, and Karen coldly mutters, "That's what happens when you only focus on the daggers." And in the next moment, a creature's head is clean sliced off as the assassin appears and strikes with his own weapon. Leon tensed up, silently thinking that both of them were terrifying, and thanked his lucky stars that they were on the same side as he, focused on his opponent. Suddenly, something zipped past his face, cutting his cheek. Elsid said he had rotten luck as that was the strongest of the 3. A giant creature stepped out to block his path. Leon thought to himself that Elsid really should have mentioned that after the fight. He immediately pushed his vision and aura to the limit, but then froze, realizing he still didn't know what the creature had just thrown at him. The answer came quickly. The monster revealed rows of jagged spikes across its chest. The protagonist shuddered at the sight. This attack felt familiar, and he remembered the rock slimes. Without a word, the creature fired a barrage of sharp spikes. Leon reacted instantly, slicing through every single one in midair. With his sword, he then lunged straight at the monster. It could only stare in horror, unable to believe he had deflected all those spikes. Leon delivered a clean strike, splitting the hideous creature in 2. He knew he never could have reacted like that without this eyesight, and without the Holy Sword he wouldn't have been able to shatter that heretical attack. But Elsid corrected him, saying, "Not at all. You were able to use that power because of your own hard training, even if it's not truly perfected yet." Karen's eyes lit up. Well, you've really done it now, haven't you?" she said, and the protagonist was only a few seconds slower than her. And for a C rank to take down a heretic like this was truly astonishing. She asked if it was possible that he didn't lack skill at all, but rather he just lacked experience. Looking at the squid-like corpse dripping blood on his blade, the protagonist replied that she could think whatever she wanted. Then suddenly something caught his eye. He stared fixedly at the sword marks left by the two warriors who were supposedly unrelated. How the hell did they look exactly the same? The angle of the slashes and even the depth of the wounds were almost identical. Leon was stunned, shocked. Finally, he realized. Else had asked if his deduction was correct. Karen tucked her weapon back into her belt and smiled. She said, "Damn, thanks to him I can finally catch my breath a little." She added that setting the shady guy aside, she hadn't expected the kid to keep up with her. Karen laughed, saying it was a pretty interesting mistake and she was still tense. Leon asked Elsid to show him. Elsid opened Karen's device. It listed high-level skills and revealed that Karen was the assassin known as the Coffin Guardian. The protagonist was stunned. In the softest voice possible, Karen admitted it, and told him to keep moving, calling him Junior. Leon stiffened and replied, "Yes, Senior." He thought that besides the light, she was just Adventurer Karen. But in the darkness, she was a special-class assassin. The Coffin Guardian, one of the 3 villains of the slums, and a dungeon explorer. In other words, she was extremely dangerous. He couldn't believe the beautiful and radiant adventurer was actually one of the 3 slum bosses. No one could have ever guessed that. It seemed Rodrigo didn't know either, and if Lionel knew, he surely would have said something. Even so, that wasn't the main issue. If Leon messed with Karen now, he would never survive the consequences. That meant he might be the only one here who knew her. True identity, and even if someone else did know, she would never let him walk away easily after this. To an assassin, identity was everything important enough to kill, to keep it a secret if necessary. Leon realized he had to remain absolutely calm, just one. And smallest change in his expression could give him away. Just then, Karen pulled him back to reality, saying there was another enemy right around the corner to the left, a bizarre creature with countless glowing eyes. It appeared growling and drooling. When its saliva hit the floor, it smoked and corroded everything. Karen said it was so disgusting she couldn't even be bothered to fight it. He guessed that wasn't just because of its appearance. Else had warned that Karen's daggers would struggle to land a fatal blow, and if the heretic had summoned it, it likely had regenerative abilities. Leon asked if they could go around. Karen said they could, but it would take another 30 minutes. She also wasn't sure if the other routes wouldn't have more monsters like this. So the protagonist had to say they had no choice but to fight. He knew the enemy was trying to stall for time to activate the City Eater. If that happened, they would lose. So the protagonist spoke up, "In that case, Coffin Guardian." A voice rang out from the shadows. Leon asked if he could finish off the monster. The assassin told him to get ready while he and Karen held it off since they were all on the same side. He said he would cooperate as much as possible. Karen said nothing, just silently observing. After a moment of hesitation, the assassin said he understood. Leon thought he had almost recovered the stamina he lost getting here. Now he just needed to unleash all his power. The creature seemed to sense them rushing in. The protagonist raised his sword and charged, and the monster roared, preparing to counterattack. Then it unleashed a skill aimed straight at Leon. In that very moment, he called Elsid's name. His holy sword began to glow, bursting with brilliant divine light. The protagonist remembered this had been proven in the battle against the suits of armor. One of the core powers of the holy sword was to nullify harmful substances. The monster squeezed its eyes shut and roared. He leaped forward and swung his sword. The blow landed, but the wound was too shallow. Immediately afterward, a series of attacks surged toward him. Leon dodged the creature's swings with precise footwork. But he knew he couldn't dodge the next strike, so he activated his vision. At the very least, he needed to block one attack from behind. Karen shouted, "Junior, right now! Do it again!" Hearing her say that, Leon hesitated should he trust her. Finally, he made his decision and lunged forward, shouting, "Let's do it!" The monster lashed out with its tentacles again, but this time, Karen's daggers flashed right beside him. They knocked away the monster's attack while the protagonist kept charging. He rushed in with a chain of continuous slashes, and the monster wailed in extreme pain and fury. Even so, Leon realized the slashes were still too shallow. He thought, I should have been faster or stronger. The monster thrashed around in a blind rage as the daggers pinned its tail down, but then something strange happened. Its movements began to seize up and the creature stumbled backward in shock. And just like that, Leon realized it couldn't move properly anymore. Something rose from its own shadow, engulfing it entirely. Weapons forged from raw energy manifested as the guardian of the coffin stepped out from the darkness, delivering a simple command, die. Countless spikes erupted from the shadow, piercing straight through the creature's body. The monster let out one final roar before collapsing to the floor. It was dead. Leon was speechless. So this is the power of an A-rank LC pointed out that the wounds weren't healing at all. That meant the attack had completely overwhelmed its regenerative abilities. The protagonist realized it was a technique created purely to annihilate a target. The assassin stood there, still controlling his power, and Leon could only think that this was truly an ultimate kill move. Then someone stepped forward complimenting them on how well they had worked together. For a team thrown together on the spot, that person asked if Leon agreed. Then he said Karen was right. Using the daggers on the tails was completely beyond his expectations. Karen brushed it off, saying that was nothing compared to that guy who loves stealing all the credit. The credit stealer. She admitted she hadn't expected an assassin to unleash a move like that. It truly deserved to be called an ultimate kill move, and she added that there was a reason he had become one of the kings of the slums, gesturing ahead. She asked if they could keep going, as it seemed there was no time left to rest. Leon agreed. This mission was a complete race against time, and everything depended on whether they could reach the ritual site before it began. A moment later, Karen noticed something ahead. She counted quickly 8 heretics. Karen muttered that they might have arrived too early, and this time it was going to be tough. Leon thought that when it came to reading power levels, no one in their team was sharper than her. Every single enemy was so strong it gave him goosebumps, and even the ones from before. Would be a total nightmare if they came in a group. He said now that they were in this deep. They could only wait for the others or go find them. Karen said both options were terrible. They might arrive too late or lose the others entirely, looking frustrated. She said she couldn't believe they had to gamble after coming this far, while the protagonist remained confused by her calm demeanor. Then everything suddenly changed. An explosion erupted nearby. It sent Leon flying forward, and in an instant a crack ran along the ceiling. He realized the explosion had come from very close by. Elcid said it was a shockwave from 2 massive sources of power colliding. Leon immediately thought someone was fighting, and Karen seemed to think so too. The heretics heard it too, and some of them suddenly moved. The MC stared straight in the direction of the sound. This gave them more options. They could help their allies right now, or deal with the small group first before searching. He hesitated in the tension, then decided they should find their allies first. If the enemy won over there, they would turn back and crush their own forces, so they needed to regroup with as many as possible. Karen agreed, saying the 4 left behind weren't pushovers either. And then she suddenly laid flat on the ground and said, Before doing so, Karen pressed close, as if listening to sounds traveling through the floor. Her ability is strong enough to reach out and grab something. She points a finger and says it's in that direction. Leon thinks to himself that her 6th sense is truly extraordinary, completely different from his own sight or footwork, when a deafening noise erupts from the hallway ahead. Something bizarre smashes through the wall. Both the protagonist and Karen are startled, and at the end of the path, giant thorns seem to be piercing someone. Looking closer, Leon sees a dying body hanging there. It's the knight. The man is coughing weakly while suspended in the air. "Sir Conrad!" the MC shouts, rushing toward him. But he quickly realizes there are enemies there. 2 of them, actually. A heretic steps forward and says he'll take care of this one. Leon looks back and sees one aiming at him while Karen has to face the other 2. It seems Sir Conrad had already defeated the ones lying on the floor. Elcid tells him not to worry about Karen. The important thing is that his opponent is very strong, so he needs to focus his power entirely. The heretic then declares, "In the name of love and justice," he spreads his arms wide and blue energy floods the area. Leon wonders if it's some kind of blue mist, as the heretic tells him to feel honored. He says that touching it will turn the protagonist into dust, and using the wandering wrath on someone like him is too merciful a death. Elsis explains that this guy is a million summoner. The MC is shocked and asks back, "A million summoner?" Elsis says heretics are divided into many types. Some are mutants who use heretical black magic inside their own bodies, while others summon living creatures or powers from another dimension. Those are the summoners, and none of them are normal. Leon draws his sword. "A merciful death, you say? That's my line." Then he lunges to attack the heretic, who mocks him, saying an ordinary sword cannot touch an underworld entity. But the next instant, his slash actually tears through the blue aura around the heretic, leaving him stunned and shocked. Leon says there are always exceptions. His holy sword can touch beings from the underworld. The heretic trembles and shouts, "Impossible," saying that no 90-millimeter weapon coated in aura should be able to break his heretical magic. Enraged, he tries again and summons a giant creature from another world. The protagonist doesn't hesitate, charging straight at the monster and backing the terrified summoner into a corner. Then a clean slash descends directly onto the heretic. The creature grabs Leon's sword and mocks him, asking if he really thought that trick would work. But then it starts to panic when it sees its wound isn't healing, wondering if the MC's attack can neutralize heretical magic. The man stammers, saying this, "It can't be. Does that mean you are—" But he cuts him off before he can finish. In sheer terror, the creature finally perishes. Leon steps back from the corpse, turns to Karen, and asks what happened on her side. She looks at him and just mutters, "What a mess." The protagonist realizes she had to deal with two enemies, so his part was probably easier. He says Sir Conrad is the most important thing right now. Karen points to his location. They approach him, and he apologizes for letting them see him in such a pathetic state. He says he cannot go with them in this condition, and tells them to leave him behind to keep moving forward. Conrad adds that he will be delayed, but as soon as he recovers, he will return. Karen cuts him off and asks how much time he has left. He ponders for a moment, and then admits that she already knows the answer. Karen says if someone of his caliber cannot use aura to stop the bleeding, the answer is all too clear. That revelation leaves Leon utterly shocked. Pressing his hand against the wound, Conrad says he likely only has 1 hour left. The MC is extremely tense. 1 hour might be enough if they can cleanse the city's malice before then. Conrad might still be saved? He thinks he would never have considered this, if there was no way to help, but now he has the holy sword. He calls for Elside and tells him to repeat his words so Leon can use the holy incantation, healing and shrinking the wound with stored power. Karen stands by, astonished, watching him begin to chant, "O Almighty Goddess, please bring comfort to those who serve justice. Do not let them tremble in the bone-chilling winds of the valley of death." Divine energy pours from his hands. Conrad stares, stunned at what Leon is doing. Karen is also stunned, thinking that this holy magic must be at least at the level of a bishop. A moment later, the hole in Conrad's abdomen has closed. He says he heard that the protagonist was the one behind this crusade, and now he understands why the bishop trusts him so much. He even asks if the protagonist is a candidate for cardinal. Elsa jokes that the MC just jumped from holy knight to cardinal candidate. Conrad says being saved like that has made him lose his composure, and although he isn't ready to fight, he will recover soon. Leon intends to answer, but Conrad interrupts, saying he clearly doesn't want to reveal his identity. He swears to keep quiet until ordered otherwise. Elsa feels awkward. He remarks that the misunderstandings are growing, and the protagonist thanks him with a confused smile. Karen says she will give Conrad a vial of elixir before they continue. After saying goodbye, Leon reminds her that they need to hurry, and both move cautiously through the hallways. Karen suddenly glances back and pins the MC against the wall, making him flustered and blush. She asks if what Conrad said is true, because for someone his age to be a cardinal candidate is truly unprecedented. With his aura and holy magic at the bishop level, she says it makes perfect sense. She added that his skills with aura and weapons were truly exceptional, then asked where he'd learned them. Leon told her he wasn't a cardinal candidate. Karen wondered if he was an apprentice of the Iron Chain Knights, begging him to tell her because her curiosity was killing her. He thought he might have fallen into a trap if he didn't know who she was, so he said he might tell her when they got closer, then pointed out her wariness and asked if everyone in the church was like that. "Are they all the same?" he asked, twirling a lock of her hair. Karen said most men told her anything she wanted to know. Leon didn't fall for it. He told her to stop playing around and focus on what they should do next. Should the two of them go on alone or find the others, Karen told him not to worry about that. A bit confused, the hero asked why. She winked and said he'd understand when they got there. They kept moving together, reaching another hallway just in time to see a body fall to the floor. Lionel was standing there with his weapon drawn, saying, "Brother Leon is here," while Rodrigo excitedly called out. The hero almost felt sorry for the heretics. Sarah said he was glad they were both safe then. The coffin keeper suddenly stepped out from the wall and asked if Sarah was happy to see him. Sarah said he didn't even know the guy was there. The assassin calmly replied that he understood. Regrouping. Leon explained that Lord Conrad wouldn't be coming with them due to his injuries, though he would recover. Regardless, they couldn't wait. After thinking it over, Sarah said it couldn't be helped, and they would push forward with just the 5 of them. Rodrigo asked Karen if she had any useful tools as an adventurer, then rudely telling her to hurry up unless she wanted him to rescue her. Karen snapped back and asked why Rodrigo didn't use whatever he was hiding instead of acting like a parasite. Rodrigo flew into a rage and loudly dared her to say it again. Then Sarah cut in, saying he would take the lead. Since he had resistance to heresy, Rodrigo and Karen would stay in the middle while Leon should take the rear as their trump card. Rodrigo scoffed at the idea of this brat of an adventurer being their trump card. Even so, he accepted it and started saying something to the coffin keeper. The keeper said he would do his part as long as they left him alone. He had been quite useful during their last partnership. Blushing a little, Karen agreed that he had done his part well, while Leon could tell she was trying way too hard. Rodrigo said it was best to ignore someone who wouldn't listen, and Lionel asked if they were going to head out. The group moved deeper through the corridors. Up ahead, Rodrigo remarked on the evil aura in the distance. Suddenly, a pitch-black circle opened in their path. Lionel said it looked like a space created by heresy, and Sarah began to chant a holy spell. Without a moment's hesitation, he stepped toward it and declared they would go inside. The others hurried to follow him. Inside, Leon felt as if he were being swallowed by a disgusting darkness. He couldn't see through the aura or hear a thing. It felt like sinking into slimy mud. As he stepped forward, his hand finally managed to reach out and break through. After that, he emerged completely sighing with relief that they had escaped that pitch-black space. Lionel tensely shouted for everyone to look around. The group realized they were surrounded. Red, bloodshot eyes stared at them from all sides, and Lionel wondered if the enemy had anticipated their arrival. A heretic said he was bored of waiting and didn't think they would take so long. With a sneer, he thanked them and held out his hand. Lionel was stubborn, not entirely sure what he was seeing. The man continued to smile, and Sarah suddenly blurted out that he was a missionary. He gently added that they had figured it out. Leon asked if malice had ranks too, and Elsid said yes, there was a hierarchy. Believers only used heresies passed down to them which they studied themselves, and became corrupted by them. But the leaders who spread the heresies were called missionaries in church terms, and they had a high rank at least on par with a bishop. The missionary continued saying today was a wonderful day because the ritual had succeeded, and all the lives sacrificed had finally paid off. Sarah stared at him intently, and the missionary said that above all, he now had the chance to show a servant of that foolish, short-sighted goddess the truth about the only true God. The group thought he had completely lost his mind. Rodrigo wondered how the ritual could have succeeded. When nothing had happened yet, the fanatics called them a hopeless race, and their leader declared the plan had already begun. Now it was just a matter of completing it. And then they would understand that everything they had done was useless. Leon asked if that meant the ritual had actually succeeded, and everything was over. But Elsid replied, not yet. He explained that the ritual to swallow the city worked like fishing. Vitality was the bait used to attract a monster from another dimension. The hero repeated, fishing. Elsid said there was still time before the thing found the bait and bit. The hero realized that meant no one knew when the monster would appear or take the bait, and Elsid confirmed it. So they could have over an hour or just a few seconds. Either way, it was a race against time. Leon called to him, and he began to chant a sacred spell begging the goddess to fill the place with warm light, so they wouldn't be lost in the darkness. A glowing orb shot into the air, and holy light flooded the area. One of the creatures recoiled in fear at what it saw. They covered their eyes by any means necessary and yelled, Elsid saying this technique combines holy arts with spirit energy. It's not as strong as the sun, but it can still restrict summoning and sorcery. He added that his own light would be more effective, but this is enough to block summoning-type sorcery. Karen enhanced her spirit energy and launched daggers at the enemy, but at the same time the missionary yanked one of his minions in front of him to use as a meat shield. Lionel attacked with his iron chain mace while Rodrigo dealt with the other heretics. Lion also charged into the fray but noticed the missionary still hadn't made a move, which means it's likely he's guarding the core of the ritual and they need to destroy the altar while the enemy still can't unleash a complete sorcery even while maintaining that smile. The missionary called them idiots and asked if they really thought that petty trick could stop his magic. Immediately, a series of evil circles appeared around him. Creatures began stepping through the gates and a horde of monsters appeared right before him. Leon panicked at their hideousness, and Elsis explained that since the direct summoning had been blocked, the missionary had created monsters instead, chimeras made from incomplete sorcery. Even though they would soon self-destruct, the protagonist realized that was more than enough to stall for time, and he wondered if the ritual could be activated immediately. Rodrigo charged at the enemies, cursing them as useless small fry, and Khan delivered a brutal punch to one of the monsters, driving his arm straight through its body. But right after that, he felt something was wrong when he looked down at his arm. It had been poisoned at the same time. Another monster hissed when Karen's daggers struck it. She quickly realized her poison had no effect, and worse yet, these things didn't even feel pain. Elzid warned that if things kept going like this, it would turn into a war of attrition, and the longer it dragged on, the worse things would get. Leon knew he was right, telling himself they needed to end this quickly, but he still couldn't unleash the full power of the Holy Sword. Elzid added that if the enemy found out who the true hero was, things would become extremely troublesome. They would throw away their lives just to hold him back, so the only way to turn the tide was to take them by surprise. The protagonist said he understood, and that he still had one final trump card. As the ritual continued to open the gate, the missionary smiled even wider, and then the group felt a completely new wave of power. They instantly knew something had changed as a massive evil presence began stepping through the gate. The missionary trembled with ecstasy, saying that he had finally arrived, and that the messenger of God had answered their prayer with power pouring from the gate. It became increasingly intense. Leon clutched his chest as his heart pounded incessantly. The altar had now disappeared, replaced by a giant pit, and an unprecedented fear washed over them. And he realized this must be the one who devours the city. He called to Elzid, but was told it was still too early to draw out all the power of the Holy Sword. For now, they just needed something to hold it back. So they would use holy arts at half power. Leon asked if holy arts alone would be enough, and Elzid admitted that it wouldn't be easy. However, thanks to what Seiza created, he had an idea. He explained that to fully manifest the goddess's symbol, they needed both the sun and the moon, and luckily they had people carrying sun and moon energy, plus a bishop skilled in mixed holy arts, and a hero. This was truly bad news for the malice. With a snap of his fingers, he opened a golden terminal and told the protagonist to read what was written on it, and he began to chant, "Sun and moon, the two pupils of the goddess observing all things, may we always be grateful. Her open eyes are divine love, and the 6 closed eyes are compassion." Seiza whispered, "That is the first verse of the goddess's scripture." Then Seiza noticed another orb forming above them. Beside the moon, a sun had also appeared. Karen glowed, saying it felt very warm. Leon continued to read, "On the day the sun and moon rise together, all who look up at the sky shall kneel and pray sincerely." Immediately, holy power spread across the area and descended upon every monster around them. Elzid proudly explained that this sanctuary was the perfect answer to dark arts. This space was rejecting foreign creatures and powers. Seiza commanded, "Let's go, everyone." The group charged in and began sweeping through the monsters. The missionary finally stopped smiling, calling it blasphemy and mocking them, saying they were just the goddess's cattle. With a snap of his fingers, he swore to slaughter them all. Then the creatures around them began to transform. Something poured out from their bodies and flowed into his hands. The missionary shed tears, saying he was heartbroken to have to sacrifice these precious believers just to deal with that cattle. Then he crushed the heart of the creature in his hand, telling them, "Look closely, this is the true grace of God." A moment later, his body began to transform. Under that dark flow of energy, muscles bulged and horns grew from his body. Leon and the spirit boy immediately tensed up. When the transformation was complete, the missionary mocked them as insects, and said he would show them the power his God had granted a lowly human. Elix warned that a sanctuary created at the protagonist's level would not last long if the missionary was already this strong. Once inside, the protagonist would have no chance. Once the effect wears off, that is. Khan and Seiza rushed past him and lunged at the monster. The spirit boy swung his weapon with all his might, while Khan followed with a series of heavy punches, but all were in vain. The monster mocked them, asking if that was really all they had. Then he grinned and said, "Now it's my turn." Those twisted limbs lashed out and attacked Khan, striking first and causing severe injuries. Seiza struggled to defend as best he could. Leon saw the truth clearly. The power gap was too great. The enemy's defense and recovery powers are far beyond their reach. He wonders if only the Holy Sword at full strength could wound him, but if that single strike fails, they will lose their only chance. Reveling in his newfound power, the missionary claims he is overflowing with vitality and calls them nothing but insects. The protagonist looks back and sees Seiza defeated, collapsed in the rubble. Khan is nearby too. Badly wounded and unable to fight, Leon can only curse under his breath. Damn it. They need a perfect strike to win. But he doesn't know if that's even possible. Karen struggles to stand wincing from her wounds. The protagonist approaches her and asks if she's all right. She says she's okay perhaps, but that doesn't solve the problem. Even the combined attacks from the Coffin Keeper and her were useless. Then a thought strikes Leon. He remembers the device recording Karen's list of abilities and starts thinking about the Coffin Keeper, especially the shadow jump skill. He desperately begs the Coffin Keeper for help. Telling her he needs her power, she is astonished and asks if he has actually come up with a plan. He says they will circle behind the missionary and destroy the altar to stop the ritual. Defeating him isn't the main goal. Karen refuses immediately, asking how on earth he intends to get behind the enemy. He thinks he's a mage who can teleport, but Leon says they don't need teleportation. They can jump through space itself. She asks how he intends to pull that off. The protagonist looks incredibly tense and flustered. He almost calls her senior again, then switches to Coffin Keeper. He promises to keep her secret if she helps him this one time. Karen looks like she's about to melt under the pressure. Leon continues saying he doesn't know her full situation, but if they fail, everyone here dies, including her. Suddenly, she jumps back away from him. Her expression becomes completely serious. Even the protagonist feels a bit anxious at that reaction. But finally, Karen admits he's right and says she will help. Blushing, she asks how long he's known about it. She grumbles that he should have told her sooner, covering her face as she moans that she's going to die of embarrassment. Leon jokes that if he'd told her sooner, she would have killed him. And that finally makes her laugh. A second later, a dagger is held right to his throat. She reminds him that a woman's secrets are very precious. Elsid lies nearby, bruised all over. Khan walks over and speaks up. Hey, Bishop, how long do you intend to just lie there? Then he calls him weak. That immediately infuriates the young spirit user. He snaps back that he's going to kill that bastard. Meanwhile, Leon and Karen head toward the monster. She says this is the distance limit for how far she can take him. He has to go the rest of the way alone. If she stays hidden any longer, the missionary will surely detect her. The protagonist just tells her not to die, which takes Karen by surprise. She lets out a small smirk. She activates the Coffin Keeper and says she never thought she'd see someone from the church worry about her. Elsis explains that the shadow jump is a space-leaping skill. It is so difficult that even mages struggle with it, so if Karen can pull it off successfully, she will land exactly where they need to be. Leon thinks that is more than enough to circle behind the enemy. A moment later, Leon bursts out of the shadows right behind the monster. As he approaches the massive hole, he thinks to himself that this must be the core of the city swallower. Tense to the breaking point, he wonders if this is truly the life essence they had been talking about. Elsid confirms it. It was created by sacrificing over 10,000 lives. Leon draws the holy sword and says with fury that this crime is absolutely unforgivable. Seiza suddenly screams, calling out, "Brother!" And he immediately realizes something is wrong. Before he can react, one of the monster's hideous limbs pierces his body. He coughs up blood. The wound is critical. Elsid screams his name in desperation. The monster tells him to give up, mocking him as nothing but the goddess's dog. It lifts him into the air and says his last chance has vanished, telling him to obediently accept death as a mercy from its god. Seiza calls out to her brother again, and Khan rushes in, scolding him for being an idiot, but the monster easily knocks them both away. The missionary says that being angry won't do any good. They will all meet the same end as Leon. He laughs loudly, asking if Leon has stopped breathing yet. Leon thinks to himself, "Death. Could it be that I really have to die here?" Without stopping malice, without doing anything hero-like. He sees Elsid saying something, but the words don't reach his ears. His mind drifts to the promise of going to the Titan Mountains together, but perhaps he can't keep that promise anymore. As his life force slowly fades, the only thought left is that promise. Then, he suddenly remembers someone once said they would trust his word because he is a man of his word. A man who gets things done no matter what happens. With a decisive swing of his sword, he cuts through the grip to free himself. Even the monster is shocked by that action. He falls and rolls to the side, riddled with injuries. With all his remaining strength, he slowly stands up. He knows the current situation is desperate, but the path of a hero is to always strive for victory. That is what his master always taught him, to never stop moving forward until the very end. Els is plunged into a tense silence, watching Leon declare loudly that he will destroy the monster and save everyone like a true hero. The monster laughs and curses him, but also admits his tenacity is impressive. He's on the verge of death and still clutching his sword. Then it challenges him to survive this attack if he can, and unleashes another strike. Suddenly, the legendary hero Rodrigo appears, and told him it seemed he had no other choice, standing by his side and telling him that what he'd done was enough. Now he would lend a hand, telling his foolish apprentice to watch closely. Leon looked up at him with a sense of relief as divine power surged through his body. He shouted, "7-star sword!" The stars appeared alongside the great chariot of Morik, and in a flash, Leon drove his blade straight through the monster, which looked back in confusion, wondering when he had gotten there. A second later, its head was severed. As it rolled along the ground, it still growled, wanting to know how Leon dared to wound it again, and the monster laughed mockingly. It asked if he really thought it was all over, just because he'd cut off its head, but then it suddenly fell silent. It realized the head wasn't growing back, and Leon smiled, asking how it could still be alive without a head. Then he mocked the filthy thing, saying that perhaps this pathetic state was what it had always craved, telling it to go serve in Dunlahan then. Because headless creatures seemed to get along well. That only made the monster more furious, roaring that his mockery and insolence wouldn't be paid for with just blood. Rodrigo warned that Leon was very weak from his injuries, and his body might not withstand a second strike, yet he still asked if he dared to do it. He nodded. Rodrigo agreed, but warned that the price to pay would be very high. The stars flared up again, the great chariot, and this time with the added power of the stars. He lunged straight at the monster once more, and the creature screamed, asking what the hell was happening. Why couldn't it heal itself? And why was its forbidden technique crumbling? Realizing the end had come, the missionary declared he would drag them all down with him, creating a vortex of evil. Immense force roaring that everyone would be buried here together. Leon just smiled, saying he had already anticipated this. That was why he'd held back a little. Now he would shatter it into 100 pieces. For the first time, the monster showed real panic, and Rodrigo told Leon not to waste a single second. The true power of the 7-star sword lies in its connection, he explained, noting that Leon was still too inexperienced to fully master a star. But he could unleash a special finishing move. The stars appeared again, and he cast 10,000 sacred slashes, a strike that tore the monster apart as he flashed past it, leaving behind a shattered corpse. Finally, its life essence crumbled desperately, trying not to be pulled into the abyss, and the creature shrieked in horror as it realized. Its self-destruct move had failed because its essence had been destroyed. It couldn't resist the suction and screamed as it was pulled in, unwilling to accept this fate. Then the city devourer appeared right behind it, opening its massive maw and swallowing the monster as easily as a feather before crashing down onto the stone floor. But the space portal closed right after, and it vanished. Luz gasped, saying that was a close one. Leon asked if it was really all over, and Rodrigo said the city devourer seemed satisfied with that snack. When the essence was destroyed, Leon froze, realizing that just a few more seconds, and they all would have become a meal for the city devourer. As everyone began to recover, Elcid was about to offer praise when he suddenly collapsed. He fell to his knees, dropping his sword, and cried out in pain. Lionel rushed over, shouting for his brother, who tried to speak to his highness. But the elf interrupted, saying he would treat him immediately. He cast a holy spell to heal Leon's wounds, despite being covered in injuries himself. Lionel still smiled, saying they had just narrowly escaped death, adding that he was glad he hadn't arrived too late, but Leon advised him to prioritize his own healing first. Karen was as cheerful as ever, asking her junior if they had won. She said when she arrived, she saw a flash of light that vanished, wondering if that was the ritual. She demanded a clear explanation of everything. Leon said they had stopped the city devourer from activating, and the missionary had been swallowed by the monster. So he was definitely dead for good. Then he turned to Lionel, saying he was about to pass out, so he would have to leave himself in his hands. A second later, he fainted, and Karen screamed in a panic, calling for her junior. Elsis watched from above with a look of satisfaction, seeing Leon had lost consciousness. He silently thought, well done.